Hello everyone, I am MANO Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Ethan Webb. This happened in October 2024. I still wake up screaming most nights, the memory of what happened in those woods pressing down on my chest like a physical weight. The doctors say writing it down might help, so here I am, trying to make sense of the impossible. I just need someone to believe me, because she's still out there. I know it. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a week-long hike through the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. Maya had been planning it for months, marking trails on maps and researching campsites with the meticulous attention to detail that made her such a brilliant architect. I'd been hesitant at first. After burning out at my tech job in Pittsburgh, the idea of being completely disconnected from the world both thrilled and terrified me. But Maya insisted it would be good for us. For me. Just you, me, Charlie, and the mountains, she'd said, scratching behind the ears of our German Shepherd mix. Charlie had wagged his tail enthusiastically, always eager to please Maya. I'd found him as a stray puppy 3 years earlier, half-starved and terrified of people, but Maya had a way with him that I never quite mastered. No emails, no calls, no responsibilities, just wilderness. The first day went exactly as planned. We left our car at the Seneca Shadows campground and headed north toward Dolly Sod's wilderness. The autumn colors were at their peak, brilliant reds and golds painting the mountainsides, the crisp air filled with the scent of fallen leaves and pine. Maya pointed out landmarks with childlike excitement, her dark curls bouncing as she moved ahead of me on the trail, Charlie trotting obediently beside her. "Those are the Seneca Rocks," she said, gesturing to the impressive stone formation jutting from the ridge. "Local legend says they were formed by the tears of a jilted bride who threw herself from the cliff." "Cheerful start to our romantic getaway," I replied, and she playfully shoved my shoulder. "I thought you'd appreciate the morbidity, Mr. I only read horror novels." We made camp that evening at a small clearing near Seneca Creek. Maya built a fire while I set up our tent, and we sat beneath the stars sharing a bottle of whiskey, Charlie curled at our feet. It felt peaceful. Normal. It was the last normal night we'd have. The trouble started on the second day. Our GPS began acting strangely as we hiked deeper into the forest. The screen would freeze, then jump ahead, showing us miles from where we actually were. "That's weird," Maya frowned, tapping the screen. "I fully charged it last night." "Maybe it's the tree cover," I suggested, though the canopy wasn't particularly dense. "Let's use the paper maps." But the paper maps proved equally confusing. Landmarks that should have been easily identifiable were either missing or appeared to be in the wrong places. We found ourselves on a trail that wasn't marked on any of our materials. "I don't like this," I said after we'd been walking for hours, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees at an angle that suggested it was much later than it should have been. "I think we should turn back." Maya checked her watch and frowned. "That's odd. According to this, we've only been walking for 2 hours, but we left camp at 8 this morning, and it looks like it's almost sunset." Charlie whined softly, pressing against my leg. He'd been on edge all day, his ears constantly pricked, eyes scanning the trees. Several times he'd growled at seemingly nothing, the fur along his spine rising. "Something's wrong with the time," I said, a chill creeping up my spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "Let's find a place to camp and get our bearings in the morning." We found a small clearing near a stream and set up camp. As I gathered firewood, I noticed strange symbols carved into several of the trees, crude drawings that resembled stick figures with elongated limbs and misshapen heads. Some were fresh, the exposed wood still pale. "Maya," I called, "come look at this." She examined the carvings, her expression troubled. "Probably just some hikers messing around." "All the way out here?" She shrugged, but I could tell she was unsettled. "Let's just get the fire going before it gets dark." The fire refused to catch properly, smoking and sputtering despite the dry kindling. When it finally did light, the flames burned with an odd bluish tinge that cast eerie shadows through our camp. Neither of us mentioned it. That night, I woke to the sound of whispers. Sitting up in our tent, I listened, convinced I could hear multiple voices just outside the thin fabric walls. Charlie was awake too, his body tense beside me, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Maya, but she slept on, her breathing deep and even. I unzipped the tent just enough to peer out. The fire had died to embers, but in their dim glow I could make out dark shapes moving between the trees at the edge of our camp. Not animals. They stood upright, their movements too deliberate. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding small in the vast darkness. "Is someone there?" The shapes retreated deeper into the forest and the whispers faded. I sat by the dying fire until dawn, Charlie vigilant beside me, both of us watching the tree line. When Maya woke, I told her what I'd seen. "You were probably dreaming," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe it was other hikers. At 3 in the morning? Miles from any marked trail? She didn't have an answer for that. We packed up quickly and continued north, hoping to find our way back to a marked trail. The day was overcast, the forest unnaturally quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just the sound of our boots on the damp earth and Charlie's panting. Around midday, we stumbled upon a cabin. It stood in a small clearing, smoke curling from its stone chimney. It looked well maintained, not like the abandoned structures we'd occasionally passed on previous hikes. "Hello?" Maya called. Anyone home?" The door creaked open, and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was tall and lean, with a thick beard and sharp blue eyes that assessed us quickly. He wore worn jeans and a flannel shirt, a hunting knife visible on his belt. "You folks lost?" he asked, his voice gravelly from disuse. "I think so," I admitted. "Our GPS is malfunctioning, and the maps don't seem right." He nodded as if this was a common occurrence. "Happens out here. The mountains play tricks." He gestured toward the darkening sky. "Storm's coming. You're welcome to wait it out here." Maya and I exchanged glances. The idea of shelter was tempting, but there was something about the man that put me on edge. Charlie seemed to feel it too, staying unusually close to my side. "That's very kind," Maya said before I could respond. "I'm Maya, this is Ethan, and that's Charlie." "Logan Porter," the man replied. "Come on in before it starts pouring." The cabin was surprisingly comfortable inside, a single large room with a sleeping loft, the walls lined with books and preserved food in jars. A fire blazed in the stone hearth, casting warm light over handmade furniture. "You live out here permanently?" I asked as Logan put a kettle on the wood stove. "Going on 8 years now," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Got tired of people, their noise, their expectations. Out here, it's just me in the forest." He glanced at us, and occasional lost hikers. The storm hit with unexpected ferocity, rain lashing against the windows, thunder shaking the cabin's foundation. Logan offered us food, a hearty stew that he claimed was venison, though something about its taste seemed off. Maya ate enthusiastically, but I only managed a few bites, my appetite diminished by unease. "You're from the city," Logan observed, watching me pick at my food. It wasn't a question. "Pittsburgh," Maya supplied. "Ethan worked in tech until his company downsized. I'm an architect." Logan's eyes lingered on me. The forest isn't kind to city folk who don't respect it. "We're experienced hikers," I said, bristling slightly at his condescension. "Experience doesn't matter much to her," he replied cryptically. "Her?" Maya asked. Logan was quiet for a moment, considering us. Then he rose and took a book from the shelf, old and bound in cracked leather. He opened it to reveal handwritten pages and crude drawings. "The locals call her the Hollow Woman," he said, turning the book so we could see. The drawing showed a tall, skeletal figure with impossibly long limbs and a featureless face save for a gaping mouth. Legend says she was a witch named Sarah Blackwood who lived in these parts in the 1800s. They hanged her for stealing children, but before she died, she cursed the forest and everyone in it. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Ghost stories around a campfire. Exactly what this strange day needed. "They say she's empty inside," Logan continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "A hollow shell that needs to be filled. So she wears people like clothes, walks around in their skin until it rots, then finds someone new." Maya laughed nervously. "Charming local folklore." "Folklore has its roots in truth," Logan said seriously. "People go missing in these woods every year. Some are never found. Others—" He trailed off, staring into the fire. "Others come back changed." The rain continued through the night, forcing us to accept Logan's offer to stay. He gave us blankets to make pallets near the fire while he climbed to the sleeping loft. Charlie refused to settle, pacing anxiously between our makeshift beds and the door. "Something's wrong with him," Maya whispered once Logan's breathing had deepened into sleep. "He doesn't like it here," I replied, stroking Charlie's fur. "Can't say I blame him." Maya propped herself up on one elbow. "Logan seems strange, but he's helping us. We'd be soaked and miserable out there." "I know, I hesitated. "Something feels off. Those symbols in the trees, the whispers, the way time seemed to move strangely, and now this guy appears out of nowhere with his witch stories." "You're being paranoid," she said, but without conviction. "Let's just get some sleep. We'll head out first thing in the morning." I must have drifted off eventually, because I woke to gray dawn light filtering through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Maya was gone, her blankets neatly folded. Logan stood by the wood stove, boiling water for coffee. "Where's Maya?" I asked, sitting up quickly. "Said she was going to gather some kindling," Logan replied. "Left about 20 minutes ago." I checked my watch, 6:30 a.m. Early, but not unreasonable. Still, anxiety gnawed at me. "Charlie? Where's Charlie?" "Your dog?" He followed her out. "Protective little beast, isn't he?" I pulled on my boots and jacket. "I'm going to find them." Logan shrugged. "Suit yourself. Coffee will be ready when you get back." Outside, the forest was draped in mist, the ground sodden from the night's rain. I called for Maya and Charlie, my voice seeming to travel only a few feet before being swallowed by the fog. There was no sign of fresh footprints or broken branches to indicate which way they had gone. After 20 minutes of increasingly panicked searching, I heard Charlie's bark, a short, sharp sound that he used when he'd found something. I followed the sound to find him standing rigid at the base of a large oak tree, his eyes fixed on something above. Maya stood on a low branch, her back to the trunk, staring into the distance. She didn't seem to hear me approach. "Maya," I called, "what are you doing up there?" She turned slowly, and my heart stuttered. Something was wrong with her face. It was Maya's face. I would know it anywhere, but her expression was blank, her usually expressive eyes flat and cold. "Gathering wood," she said, her voice oddly monotone. She held up an armful of sticks as if to prove her point. Charlie growled, the sound low and threatening. He'd never acted aggressively toward Maya before. "Come down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's go back to the cabin." She descended with unnatural grace, her movements fluid in a way that Maya, always slightly clumsy, had never been. When she reached the ground, she smiled at me, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "I found something in the woods," she said, pulling an object from her pocket. It was a small figurine carved from dark wood, a crude representation of the elongated figure from Logan's book. "Isn't it beautiful?" "Put that down," I said sharply. "We don't know what it is." She tucked it back into her pocket. "Don't be silly, Ethan. It's just a souvenir." Charlie stayed between us on the walk back, his body tense, occasionally looking up at Maya with wary eyes. She didn't seem to notice, humming tunelessly under her breath. Logan was waiting on the porch when we returned, a steaming mug in his hands. His eyes narrowed when he saw Maya. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked her, his voice neutral but his posture suddenly alert. "Just some wood," Maya replied, walking past him into the cabin. Logan caught my arm as I moved to follow. "That's not your girlfriend," he whispered urgently. I jerked away from him. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen it before," he said. "The Hollow Woman. She's wearing your girl like a damn costume." "You're insane," I hissed, though cold dread was pooling in my stomach. I'd sensed something wrong with Maya the moment I found her in that tree. "Listen to your dog." Logan nodded toward Charlie, who stood stiff-legged at the door, refusing to enter while Maya was inside. "Animals know. They can see what's inside, or what isn't." "If you're right," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "then where's the real Maya?" Logan's face was grim. "If she's lucky, she's dead. If not..." He glanced toward the cabin. "We need to find her before nightfall. The Hollow Woman can't maintain her disguise in the dark." Despite every rational part of my brain screaming that this was madness, I found myself following Logan into the forest an hour later. We'd left the thing that looked like Maya at the cabin, telling her we were going to try to find the trail back to the road. She'd smiled that not-quite-right smile and said she was tired from her early morning walk and would wait for us. Charlie led the way, nose to the ground, occasionally looking back to make sure we were following. Logan carried a rifle slung over his shoulder and had a pistol tucked into his waistband. I'd argued against the weapons, but he'd been adamant. "You don't know what we might find," he'd said, his expression dark. "Some things can't be reasoned with." We walked for what felt like hours, the forest growing denser, the light dimmer though it was only midday. I began to notice more of the strange symbols carved into trees, and occasionally small arrangements of stones or bones on the ground. "How do you know about all this?" I asked Logan as we paused to drink from our canteens. "About the Hollow Woman?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My sister," he finally said. "She came back wrong after disappearing in these woods for 3 days. No one believed me when I said it wasn't her anymore. They thought the trauma of being lost had changed her." His knuckles whitened around his canteen. "6 months later, she killed our parents in their sleep and disappeared back into the forest. That's when I came out here. To find her, or what was wearing her face." "Did you?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Parts of her," he said grimly. "Just parts." Charlie suddenly barked, his tail straight up in alert. He ran ahead, disappearing into a thicket. We followed, pushing through dense underbrush until we reached a small clearing dominated by an ancient oak tree. Its trunk was massive, gnarled with age, and at its base was a small opening, just large enough for a person to crawl through. "A root cellar," Logan said, crouching to peer into the darkness. "Old homestead must have been here once." Charlie whined at the entrance, pawing anxiously at the ground. I took the flashlight from my pack and shone it into the opening. The beam revealed rough earthen steps leading down into darkness. "Maya!" I called, my voice echoing slightly. "Are you down there?" A weak sound came from below, a moan or a whimper. Charlie barked excitedly. I moved to enter, but Logan held me back. "Could be a trap," he warned. "Let me go first." He drew his pistol and disappeared into the hole. I waited, heart pounding, counting the seconds. After almost a minute, his voice called up. "She's here, and she's alive." I scrambled down the steps into a surprisingly large underground chamber, the ceiling reinforced with old timber beams, the walls lined with shelves holding jars of unidentifiable contents. And there, in the center of the dirt floor, lay Maya, the real Maya, bound with what looked like twisted tree roots, her clothes torn and soiled, her face bruised, but her eyes, her beautiful, expressive eyes, wide and alert. "Ethan," she sobbed as I fell to my knees beside her, frantically working to free her from the bindings. "It took my face. It took my face." "I know," I said, pulling her into my arms once she was free. But I found you. You're safe now." Logan stood watch at the cellar entrance, his expression grim. "We need to move," he said. "Night's coming, and she'll know we've found her prize." I helped Maya to her feet. She was weak and disoriented, telling us in broken sentences how she'd been attacked while relieving herself in the woods early yesterday morning. "It came out of nowhere," she said as we climbed the steps back to the surface. "A woman, but not a woman. So tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent wrong. It touched my face, and then I was watching myself walk away. My body, but not me, inside it." She began to sob again. I could feel it wearing me like a glove. "We need to get back to the cabin," Logan said once we were above ground. "Get your things and get you out of these woods before—" A scream cut through the forest, high and inhuman. Charlie growled, his hackles raised. "She knows," Logan whispered. "Run, now." We ran, half carrying Maya between us, Charlie ranging ahead and circling back, guiding us through the increasingly dark forest. The sun was setting far too quickly, darkness bleeding between the trees like spilled ink. "It's changing time again," Logan panted as we paused for breath. "She's stronger at night." Another scream, closer now, not behind us but to our left. It was circling, cutting us off from the cabin. "This way," Logan said, pulling us in a new direction. "There's an old hunter's blind not far. We can hole up there until dawn." We stumbled through the gathering darkness, branches whipping our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. The screams continued, sometimes distant, sometimes terrifyingly close, surrounding us from all sides. The hunter's blind was little more than a dilapidated wooden platform built into the fork of a large tree, accessible by a rickety ladder. Logan went up first, then helped pull Maya up while I kept watch below with the rifle he'd thrust into my hands. Charlie refused to climb, standing guard at the base of the tree. "Good dog," I whispered, scratching his ears before climbing up myself. The blind was small, forcing us to huddle together. Logan produced a small oil lamp from a metal box stored there, casting just enough light for us to see each other's faces. "What's the plan?" I asked, holding Maya close to my side. She was shivering despite the relatively mild temperature. "Wait for dawn," Logan said. "The Hollow Woman is strongest at night, but she can't maintain a human disguise in direct sunlight. At first light, we make for the Eastern Trail. It's the quickest way out of her territory." "And that thing wearing Maya's face?" I asked. Logan's expression was hard. "If we're lucky, it will come for us, and I can end it." He patted the pistol at his waist. "Bullets blessed by a local preacher. One of the few things that can hurt it, according to the stories." Maya leaned forward suddenly. "You knew," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since we found her. "You knew what was in these woods, yet you let us walk right into it." Logan wouldn't meet her eyes. "I tried to warn you with those stories." "Bullshit," she spat. "You could have told us explicitly. Could have guided us back to the trail when we first arrived at your cabin." A terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. "Unless you wanted us to encounter it," I said slowly. "Unless you're working with it somehow." Logan's hand moved to his pistol. "You don't understand. She takes people no matter what. At least this way." "This way what?" I demanded. "This way it isn't me," he shouted, his composure cracking. 8 years I've been out here. 8 years I've been sending hikers in the wrong direction, delaying them until she can take them. It's the only way she leaves me alone." Maya lunged at him, her fear transformed to rage. "You bastard! You sacrificed us!" I grabbed her, pulling her back as Logan drew his pistol. For a tense moment, we were frozen in a tableau of betrayal and desperation. Then Charlie barked, a warning sound, and something heavy hit the underside of the blind. The entire structure shook, ancient wood groaning. "She's here," Logan whispered, the blood draining from his face. Another impact, stronger this time. Through the cracks in the floor, I could see Charlie circling the tree, barking furiously at something in the shadows just beyond the reach of our lamplight. "Give them to me, Logan Porter," a voice called from below. Maya's voice, but wrong, like multiple voices layered on top of each other. "Give them to me as we agreed, and you may have another year of peace." Logan moved to the edge of the blind, looking down. "The deal was one person every season," he called back. "I gave you the woman. The man wasn't part of our arrangement." "I want them both," the thing said. "The woman's soul is strong. I need her mate to keep the skin from rotting too quickly." I felt sick, rage and fear churning in my stomach. "You're not getting either of us," I shouted, raising the rifle. A terrible laugh floated up from below. "You cannot harm me with that, Ethan Webb. I am as old as these mountains." "Maybe not," Logan said, his voice steady now, "but I can." He raised his pistol and, to my shock, pointed it at Maya. "No," I shouted, moving to shield her. "It's the only way," Logan said, his eyes wild. "If the real host dies, it weakens her. It's how I killed my sister, freed her from being worn like a puppet." Another impact shook the blind, wood splintering beneath us. Charlie's barking became frantic, interspersed with growls and yelps. What happened next is still a blur in my memory. The floor gave way beneath us, sending us tumbling to the ground. I landed hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. Through blurred vision, I saw Logan struggling with Maya, the pistol between them. There was a deafening bang, and Logan stumbled backward, blood blooming on his chest. Maya stood unharmed, the pistol now in her hands. But it wasn't Maya who had shot Logan. It was the hollow woman, wearing Maya's face. She had found us. And there, crawling away from the collapsed blind, was the real Maya, her eyes wide with terror. I scrambled to my feet, placing myself between the two identical women. Charlie was at my side instantly, his teeth bared at the false Maya. "How touching," the thing wearing Maya's face said, its voice that horrible layered sound again. "The loyal pet and his master." Logan lay gasping on the ground, blood bubbling from his lips. "The bullets," he wheezed. "Use the bullets." The false Maya smiled, raising the pistol. "Yes, Ethan, use the blessed bullets. But which one of us will you shoot? Are you certain you can tell us apart?" I looked between them, panic rising. They were identical. Same face, same clothes, same voice when the hollow woman chose to use it. "Ethan," both called simultaneously, both reaching for me. Charlie growled, then lunged at the Maya holding the gun, sinking his teeth into her arm. She shrieked, an inhuman sound of rage and pain, and flung him aside with impossible strength. He hit a tree with a yelp and lay still. "Charlie," I screamed, starting toward him. The false Maya leveled the pistol at the real one. "Choose, Ethan Webb. Which Maya lives? The one you found in a hole in the ground? Or the one you've been traveling with? Perhaps I've been wearing this skin longer than you realize." "Don't listen to it," the real Maya said, her voice trembling. "You know me, Ethan. You found me." The other Maya smiled cruelly. "Are you sure? Time works strangely in these woods. Maybe what you found was just another shell I've discarded." I was frozen, uncertain, terrified of making the wrong choice. Then I noticed something. The wooden figurine, partially visible in the pocket of the armed Maya. The totem she'd shown me after I found her in the tree. "The day we met," I said, looking directly at the real Maya. "What did you say to me?" The unarmed Maya's eyes softened with recognition. "Nice dog. Shame about the owner," she replied without hesitation. "Because you were letting Charlie drink from your water bottle and I thought it was unsanitary." I almost smiled at the memory. Then I lunged for the false Maya, grabbing for the gun. She was inhumanly strong, her fingers like iron around my wrist. I could feel my bones grinding together under her grip. "Fool," she hissed, her face beginning to change, the skin rippling as what lay beneath fought to emerge. "You could have lived a little longer." A gunshot cracked through the night. The false Maya jerked, black ichor spraying from a wound in her side. I turned to see Logan, propped against a tree trunk holding a second, smaller pistol. "Run," he gasped before collapsing. The hollow woman screamed, the sound tearing through the forest like a physical force. Maya grabbed my hand, and we ran, pausing only to scoop up Charlie, who whimpered but was alive. We ran blindly through the darkness, branches tearing at our clothes and skin, the inhuman screams pursuing us. Somehow, we found ourselves back at Logan's cabin. Without discussion, we burst through the door and began gathering our gear. "We need to keep moving," Maya said, her voice stronger now that we had a plan. "Get as far from here as possible before dawn." I nodded, shouldering my pack and checking Charlie's injuries. He had a nasty gash on his flank but could walk. As I tended to him, Maya found a first aid kit and quickly bandaged the worst of our cuts. We left the cabin at a brisk pace, using my flashlight to navigate. The forest was eerily silent. No insect sounds, no night birds, not even the whisper of wind through leaves. Just our labored breathing and Charlie's occasional whine. "Do you think Logan—" Maya didn't finish the question. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "He betrayed us, but in the end, he was as much a victim as we were," she finished, "just broken by it sooner." We walked for what felt like hours, the darkness absolute except for our single light. Eventually, exhaustion forced us to stop. We huddled together at the base of a large boulder, too tired to continue but too afraid to sleep. Charlie kept watch, his head raised, nose testing the air. "If we survive this," Maya whispered, her head on my shoulder, "I'm never setting foot in the woods again." I squeezed her hand. "When we survive this, we can move to the desert. Nothing but sand and sun for miles." She laughed weakly, then froze. "Do you hear that?" I listened. Distantly, barely audible, came the sound of whispers. Dozens of overlapping voices speaking words I couldn't quite make out. "It's coming," Maya said, terror edging her voice. Charlie growled, facing the direction of the whispers. I raised the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness to reveal nothing, just trees and underbrush. But the whispers grew louder, surrounding us. And then, stepping into the circle of light as if materializing from the darkness itself, came the hollow woman, no longer wearing Maya's face but her true form. She was impossibly tall, her limbs elongated and jointed wrong, her body swaying like a branch in the wind. Her face was mostly featureless except for a wide, gaping mouth filled with needle-like teeth. Where the bullet had struck her, black fluid oozed down her side. "Ethan Webb," she said, her voice the sound of dead leaves scraping stone. "Your soul is bright with fear. It will taste sweet." I pushed Maya behind me, though what protection I could offer against this thing I didn't know. Charlie stood his ground beside me, growling continuously. "You can't have her," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "You can't have either of us." The hollow woman tilted her head at an impossible angle. "I have walked these woods for 200 years. I have worn 1,000 skins. You are nothing but meat and terror." She took a step toward us, her movements jerky and wrong, like a puppet with tangled strings. Charlie launched himself at her, teeth bared. She swatted him aside with one elongated arm, sending him tumbling into the underbrush. I had nothing, no weapon, no plan, just the desperate need to keep this thing away from Maya. The hollow woman reached for me, her fingers extending like twigs, black fluid dripping from their tips. I braced myself for her touch, for the sensation of being hollowed out, emptied of everything that made me who I was. But then the forest was suddenly, brilliantly illuminated. The hollow woman shrieked, her body contorting as she recoiled from the light. I turned to see Maya holding aloft a flare, one of the emergency supplies from her pack. "Sunlight weakens her," Maya shouted over the creature's screams. "Logan said she can't maintain her form in direct light." The hollow woman retreated from the harsh chemical glare, her body seeming to thin and stretch, becoming more spectral by the second. "The flare won't last long," I said. "We need to move." We ran again, the flare lighting our way, Charlie limping alongside us. Behind us, the whispers rose to a cacophony, like dozens of tortured souls begging for release. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The flare's light began to dim after 10 minutes, its brilliance fading to a dull red glow. Dawn was still hours away. We needed shelter, somewhere to make a stand until sunlight could weaken the creature. "There," Maya gasped, pointing ahead. In the fading light of the flare, I could make out a structure, a small stone chapel, long abandoned, its roof partially collapsed but its walls still standing. We staggered toward it, exhaustion making our movements clumsy. The chapel door hung off its hinges. We pushed inside, Charlie collapsing on the stone floor while Maya and I dragged a heavy wooden pew across the entrance. "It won't hold her," Maya said, her voice hoarse. "Not if she really wants in." I surveyed our sanctuary. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating broken pews, a toppled altar, and walls marked with crude symbols, the same ones I'd seen carved into trees. This place had been hers for a long time. "Look," Maya said, pointing to a stone basin near the altar. It was filled with clear water, impossibly clean given the chapel's state of disrepair. "Could be a spring underneath." I hesitated, but thirst overcame caution. We drank deeply, the water tasting sweeter and cleaner than any I'd ever had. Immediately, warmth spread through my body, the fatigue of our ordeal temporarily lifting. Even Charlie seemed revitalized after lapping at the basin, rising to his feet with renewed alertness. "There's something special about this place," Maya whispered, looking around with widened eyes. "Can you feel it?" I could. Despite the chapel's abandoned state, there was a presence here, not menacing like the hollow woman, but something older, steadier. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm. "Maybe it was built as protection," I suggested. "A sanctuary against her." Maya nodded, tracing one of the symbols on the wall. "These aren't her marks. They're different, more geometric, less organic." We searched the chapel thoroughly, finding little of use. Some ancient rotted hymn books, a few candle stubs, a tarnished silver cup. But behind the altar, partially hidden by fallen stones, Maya discovered a small wooden chest. The lock was rusted through and it took both of us to break it open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a knife with a blade that seemed to be made of silver, its handle inscribed with the same geometric symbols that mark the chapel walls. "It's a diary," Maya said, carefully turning the brittle pages of the journal. "Dated 1842. Listen to this. April the 17th. 3 more children have vanished from the settlement. The men blame wolves, but the women know better. They have seen her at the edge of the forest, tall and thin with hungry eyes. Sarah Blackwood returned just as the elders feared. April 30th. We hanged Sarah Blackwood today, though I fear it was not truly her. The thing wearing her skin screeched curses as the trapdoor fell. Tonight we will burn her body and scatter the ashes in the river. May 2. God help us, she has returned. Not as Sarah, but as little Mary Collins who disappeared last winter. But Mary's eyes are hollow now, and she spoke with Sarah's voice. I have retreated to the chapel with those who would listen. I fear this will be my last entry." Maya looked up from the journal, her face pale in the moonlight. "There's more, but the writing becomes erratic, difficult to read." "So Logan was right," I said. "She's been here for generations, wearing people-like clothes. But this chapel," Maya held up the silver knife, "this was meant to fight her." Before I could respond, Charlie growled, his attention fixed on the barricaded door. Outside, the whispers had returned. Closer now, more insistent. "Ethan Webb," the layered voice called. "I can smell your fear. It grows sweeter as the night deepens." I moved to Maya's side, taking the silver knife from her hands. "Stay back," I whispered, though I had no idea how to fight the creature, knife or no knife. The whispers changed, becoming a rhythmic chant. The barricaded door began to tremble, dust shaking from its ancient wood. The temperature in the chapel plummeted, our breath becoming visible in the sudden cold. "She's trying to get in," Maya gasped, clutching my arm. The silver knife felt warm in my hand, almost vibrating with energy. I remembered what Logan had said about the blessed bullets, one of the few things that could hurt the creature. Could this knife, stored in a chapel and marked with protective symbols, be another? "We need to hold out until dawn," I said, positioning myself between Maya and the door. Charlie flanked me, his hackles raised, teeth bared. The door splintered, the heavy pew sliding back as if pushed by invisible hands. And there she stood, the hollow woman, her elongated form silhouetted against the night sky. She seemed larger now, her limbs longer, her mouth a gaping void that consumed half her face. "So many bright souls in one small place," she rasped, her head swaying hypnotically. "So much fear to feast upon." She stepped forward, ducking to enter the chapel. As she crossed the threshold, I expected, hoped, that the sacred ground might repel her. But she moved inward unimpeded, her body casting impossible shadows in the moonlight. Charlie attacked first, leaping at her with a snarl. She caught him in midair with one elongated arm, holding him aloft as he thrashed and snapped. With horrifying calm, she began to squeeze. I charged without thinking, the silver knife held before me like a talisman. As I thrust it toward her chest, the hollow woman released Charlie and twisted away with unnatural speed. The knife sliced across her arm instead, drawing a line of black ichor that steamed in the cold air. She shrieked, the sound like glass shattering inside my skull. The wound smoking where the silver had touched her, she retreated several steps, her featureless face somehow conveying rage. "You dare!" she hissed. "With my sister's blade?" For an instant she seemed almost human in her anger, a woman betrayed rather than a monster thwarted. But the moment passed, and she lunged again, her body stretching and distorting as she moved. Maya had dragged Charlie to safety behind the altar. Now she emerged, holding the tarnished silver cup from the altar. It was filled with water from the basin. "The water!" she shouted. "Use the water!" Understanding flashed between us. I slashed with the knife, forcing the hollow woman back, giving Maya the opening she needed. She flung the water directly into the creature's face. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Where the water touched, the hollow woman's skin sizzled and peeled away, revealing not flesh beneath, but a writhing darkness, like smoke given temporary form. She screamed, the sound no longer human or even animal, just raw, elemental fury. I pressed the advantage, slashing again with the knife, opening a long wound across her chest. Black ichor poured out, burning the stone floor where it fell. The hollow woman staggered back, her form beginning to unravel at the edges, wisps of darkness peeling away like mist in strong wind. "Get more water," I shouted to Maya, who was already refilling the cup at the basin. The hollow woman retreated toward the door, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. For a moment, I thought we had won, that she was fleeing. Then she straightened, her form solidifying again, and began to laugh. A terrible sound like rocks grinding together. "Fools!" she rasped. "This shell is damaged, but I have worn 1,000 skins." Before our eyes, her body began to change, shrinking, condensing, the elongated limbs contracting, the featureless face developing features, familiar features, my features. I found myself staring at my own face, twisted into a grotesque smile. The hollow woman had taken my appearance, though imperfectly, the proportions slightly wrong, the eyes too deep, too dark. "Maya!" It called in a chilling approximation of my voice. "Help me. She's hurting me." Maya froze, the cup of water in her hands, her eyes darting between me and my doppelganger. "Don't listen to it," I shouted, brandishing the knife. "Maya, it's me." The false Ethan's smile widened unnaturally. "Of course you would say that. She's already taken you, hasn't she? I'm the real Ethan, Maya. Please, help me." Maya backed away, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Charlie growled, looking between us uncertainly. I realized with mounting horror that the creature was trying to turn Maya against me, to isolate each of us to make us easier prey. And it was working. I could see the doubt in Maya's eyes. "Ask me something," I said desperately. "Something only I would know." Maya hesitated, then spoke. "The night we met, Charlie. What did I say?" "You said he was too skinny," I replied immediately, "that we needed to fatten him up if we were keeping him, and then you gave him half your sandwich even though you said you wouldn't." Relief washed over Maya's face, quickly replaced by determination. She hurled the water, not at me, but at my doppelganger. The false Ethan howled as the water struck, its form rippling, features melting like wax near flame. It lunged at Maya, fingers extending into claws, mouth opening far wider than any human mouth could. I intercepted it, driving the silver knife deep into its chest. The creature convulsed, black ichor erupting from the wound, spattering my face and arms with burning droplets. I twisted the knife, driving it deeper. The hollow woman's scream this time was different. Less rage, more pain. Real pain. It staggered back, pulling itself off the knife, its form shifting rapidly now, unable to maintain any single appearance. One moment it wore my face, the next Maya's, then Logan's, then faces I didn't recognize. Dozens of them in rapid succession, a grotesque slideshow of its victims. "More water," I shouted, advancing with the dripping knife. Maya threw cupful after cupful, each splash causing more of the creature to dissolve. It retreated toward the door, its form increasingly unstable, wisps of darkness trailing from it like smoke. Outside, a faint glow had appeared on the horizon. Dawn was approaching. "We just need to hold out a little longer," Maya gasped, refilling the cup again. The hollow woman seemed to realize this too. With a final, desperate surge, it launched itself at me, its body elongating once more, clawed hands grasping for my throat. I slashed wildly with the knife, feeling it connect, but the creature's momentum carried us both to the ground. Its weight pressed down on me, suffocating, its face shifting constantly above mine. Maya, Logan, my own face, strangers, all with the same terrible empty eyes. Its hands found my throat, squeezing with inhuman strength. Spots danced in my vision as I struggled for air. I still held the knife, but my arm was pinned beneath the creature's weight. I could hear Maya shouting, feel Charlie's teeth snapping at the creature, but it was all growing distant as consciousness began to fade. Then, suddenly, light, brilliant golden light streaming through the chapel's broken roof as the sun crested the horizon. The hollow woman reared back, releasing my throat, her form seeming to catch fire where the sunlight touched it. She scrambled off me, retreating to the shadows by the altar, but the sun's rays followed relentlessly as it rose higher. She shrieked, her body smoking now, pieces of it flaking away like burning paper. "This isn't the end," she hissed. Her voice fracturing into dozens of separate voices. "I am eternal. I am the forest itself." With a final, terrible cry, she dissolved into ash and shadow, leaving nothing but a dark stain on the chapel floor. For a long moment, the three of us stood frozen, waiting for her to reform, to attack again. But the chapel remained silent except for our ragged breathing and Charlie's occasional whine. Is she gone?" Maya whispered finally. "I don't know," I answered honestly, still gripping the silver knife. "But I think we're safe for now." We gathered our belongings in silence, Maya carefully wrapping the journal and knife in cloth before putting them in her pack. Charlie limped to the door, eager to leave this place despite his injuries. Outside, the forest looked different in the morning light, just trees and underbrush, no lurking shadows or impossible angles. We found a trail heading east within an hour of walking and followed it without discussion, moving as quickly as our exhausted bodies would allow. It took us 2 days to reach civilization, a small ranger station near the eastern border of the Monongahela National Forest. The ranger looked alarmed when we stumbled out of the tree line, covered in cuts and bruises, clothes torn, Maya's face still bearing the marks of her imprisonment in that earthen cellar. We told a simplified version of the truth, that we'd gotten lost, been caught in a storm, suffered a fall. The ranger called for medical assistance and helped us contact our families. No one questioned our story too deeply, perhaps because they didn't want to hear the real one. That was 6 months ago. 6. Maya still wakes screaming some nights, clawing at her face as if trying to remove a mask that isn't there. Charlie refuses to enter any wooded area, even the small park near our new apartment in Columbus. And I check the mirror every morning, studying my reflection for any sign that my eyes are wrong, that something else is looking back at me. We sent the journal and knife to researchers at a university, along with a detailed account of what happened. We haven't heard back. Maybe they dismissed it as the ravings of traumatized hikers. Maybe they're investigating. I don't know which possibility frightens me more. Logan's body was never found, though authorities discovered his cabin exactly where we described it. They said he was a known recluse, a former professor of anthropology who'd suffered a breakdown years earlier. No one mentioned his sister. As for the Hollow Woman, I have no illusions that we destroyed her. Entities that old, that powerful, don't die easily. Sometimes when the wind blows hard enough to rattle our windows, I imagine I can hear whispers, dozens of overlapping voices calling my name. Maya wants to move farther away. Arizona, maybe, or Nevada. Somewhere with wide open spaces and relentless sun. Somewhere without forests or shadows or ancient, hungry things. I've agreed, but part of me wonders if it will matter. The Hollow Woman said she was the forest itself. But what if she's more? What if she's in all dark places, all shadows? What if she's still hunting us, patient and eternal? What if, even now, she's learning to wear the desert like she wore the woods? I check the mirror every morning, and every morning I wonder, would I know if the face looking back wasn't really mine? My name is Mason Wells. This happened in October 2024, and not a day goes by that I don't think about it. Some nights, I still wake up thinking I can hear her whispers carried on the wind. I've always felt at home in the wilderness. As an environmental researcher, I'd spent countless hours in forests across the Appalachians, studying the delicate ecosystems that most people never see. Eli, my German shepherd, had been my faithful companion for 6 years in the field. He was better at detecting changes in the environment than any equipment I owned, which is why I should have paid more attention when he started acting strange that first night in Dolly Sods. The annual camping trip had been our tradition since college. Liam had suggested the Dolly Sods Wilderness in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest this year, a remote plateau known for its unusual ecosystem that resembles northern Canada more than the southern Appalachians. It was remote, pristine, and according to the local forums Liam had browsed, home to some interesting folklore. It's going to be spectacular, Liam had insisted on the drive up. His enthusiasm was infectious, as always. 6'2", with perpetually windswept brown hair, Liam Foster had been my best friend since freshman orientation. The place used to be called the Devil's Sod by early settlers, supposedly haunted. Sophia rolled her eyes from the passenger seat. You say that about every place we go. With her practical nature and no-nonsense attitude, she balanced out Liam's impulsiveness perfectly. Her dark, curly hair was pulled back in its usual tight ponytail, her medical training evident in the way she'd already organized a first aid kit specifically for this trip. No, this one's different, Liam insisted. There's this legend about a witch they called Old Hester. Supposedly, she was executed in the 1830s for killing local children, but her body disappeared from the hanging tree. People still report seeing her, especially around bare rocks. Which is exactly why we're camping far away from there, Cameron chimed in from the back seat beside me. He pushed his glasses up nervously, his lanky frame cramped in the confined space. The most anxious of our group, Cameron was brilliant with technology but completely out of his element in the wilderness. I did some research. There are plenty of documented cases of people getting lost there, even experienced hikers. Vera, sitting on my other side with Eli's head in her lap, snorted. People get lost in the woods all the time because they're idiots who don't prepare. Her blunt delivery was typical. 5 years as a military medic before meeting Cameron had left her with little patience for what she called civilian nonsense. Her blonde hair was cropped short, practical, just like everything else about her. I scratched Eli behind the ears, feeling that familiar excitement of venturing somewhere new. The biodiversity there is incredible. The whole plateau was clear-cut and burned in the early 1900s, but it's recovered into this unique ecosystem. The upper elevations have plants you'd typically find in Canada. See? Mason's excited, Liam said triumphantly, and he's the expert. That was our dynamic. Liam the adventurer, Sophia the pragmatist, Cameron the worrier, Vera the protector, and me somewhere in the middle. Cautious but curious. In hindsight, I realize how perfectly suited we were for what was coming. How perfectly vulnerable. We arrived at the trailhead around noon. The October air was crisp, carrying that distinctive autumn scent of decaying leaves and earth preparing for winter. The forest was a painter's dream. Vibrant reds and golds set against the dark green of pines. Bear Rock's trail would take us deep into the wilderness, where we planned to set up camp near one of the small streams that fed into Red Creek. Cell reception's already spotty, Cameron noted, checking his phone, but I downloaded offline maps on 3 different apps. And we have physical maps, Vera added, patting her pocket, and a compass. Liam hoisted his pack. Ready for the best trip yet? If only we'd known. The hike in was beautiful but strenuous. By late afternoon, we'd covered about 6 miles and found a perfect clearing near a small tributary of Red Creek. The spot offered a flat area for our tents, a natural stone fire ring left by previous campers, and access to clean water. "This is it," I said, dropping my pack. "Good visibility, water source, level ground." Eli seemed content too, sniffing around the perimeter of our chosen site. He was my barometer for safety. A dog that size has instincts humans have lost over centuries of civilization. We set up camp efficiently, having done this together so many times before. 3 tents, 1 for Liam and Sophia, 1 for Cameron and Vera, and 1 for me and Eli. A central cooking area. Bear bags hung in trees away from our sleeping quarters, everything by the book. As dusk approached, Liam and I gathered firewood while the others filtered water and prepared dinner. That's when I first noticed something odd. Eli was sticking unusually close to me, occasionally looking toward the northern edge of our clearing and giving a low whine. "What is it, boy?" I asked, following his gaze. The trees looked like any others, their shadows lengthening with the setting sun. "Probably smells a deer," Liam suggested, armful of kindling. "Or a bear." "Maybe," I agreed, but something felt off. I'd spent enough time with Eli in the wilderness to know his different alerts. This wasn't excitement over wildlife. It was unease. We returned to camp, and the evening proceeded normally. Freeze-dried camping meals enhanced by Sophia's skill with portable spices, stories around the fire, the comfortable familiarity of old friends. The night sky was incredible, with the Milky Way visible in brilliant detail thanks to the lack of light pollution. "So, tell us more about this witch," Cameron said as we sat around the fire after dinner. "Old Hester, was it?" Liam grinned, his face transformed into something almost sinister by the dancing firelight. "They say she lived in a cabin somewhere in these woods in the 1820s. Locals avoided her, said she practiced dark magic. Then children started disappearing from nearby settlements. Typical historic scapegoating of solitary women," Sophia interjected. "Maybe," Liam conceded. "But the story goes that when they finally cornered her, she cursed the entire region. They hanged her from a tree, but when they came back the next morning to bury her, the body was gone. Only strange symbols carved into the trunk remained." "What kind of symbols?" Vera asked, leaning forward. "No one knows exactly, but supposedly anyone who sees them and understands them is marked for death. They say she still roams these woods, looking for trespassers to take revenge on. "Charming bedtime story," Cameron muttered, glancing nervously at the darkness beyond our fire's light. I was about to comment when Eli suddenly stood up, hackles raised, staring intently at the same northern edge of our camp he'd been watching earlier. A low growl built in his throat. "What is it, Eli?" I stood up, peering into the darkness. The firelight only extended about 15 feet, beyond which was impenetrable blackness. Everyone fell silent, listening. For a moment, all we could hear was the crackling of the fire and the distant hooting of an owl. Then, a rustling, too deliberate for wind, too rhythmic for an animal. "Probably deer," Vera said, but she reached for the heavy flashlight beside her. The sound stopped. Eli's growl subsided, but he remained alert, ears forward. "I think we should call it a night," I suggested, suddenly eager to be zipped safely inside my tent. "Early start tomorrow." Everyone agreed a little too quickly. We banked the fire, secured the camp, and retreated to our respective tents. Inside mine, Eli curled up at the foot of my sleeping bag as usual, but he remained tense, occasionally lifting his head to listen. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Just the woods." I fell asleep eventually, but my dreams were troubled. Distorted images of trees with faces, of paths that twisted back on themselves, of hands reaching up through the soil. I woke once in the middle of the night, certain I'd heard someone whispering my name. Eli was sitting up, staring at the tent wall, but he made no sound. Morning revealed the first tangible sign that something was wrong. Our carefully hung food bags had been torn down, not cut, not chewed through by bears, but deliberately untied and the contents strewn across the ground. Most disturbing of all, the food itself had rotted overnight. Packages of dehydrated meals were bloated with mold. Granola bars were infested with wiggling larvae. An apple Sophia had saved for breakfast was blackened and oozing. "This is impossible," Cameron said, examining a packet of trail mix now crawling with maggots. "These were sealed packages." "Could be some kind of fungal spore in this area," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. "We should filter extra water to compensate for the lost food." "We have the emergency rations in my pack," Vera said. She'd insisted on bringing a sealed container with 3 days of calorie-dense emergency food. "Military grade, completely sealed. Those should be fine." She was right. Her supplies were untouched. It would mean cutting our trip short, but at least we wouldn't go hungry. "Let's talk about what really happened," Liam said, examining the ropes that had secured our bear bags. These were untied, not cut or broken. Something with hands did this. "Someone, you mean," Sophia corrected. "Probably locals messing with out-of-towners." "At night, miles from any road." Cameron's voice cracked slightly. "How would they even find us?" I checked my GPS while they debated. "Guys," I interrupted, frowning at the screen. "According to this, we're 2 miles east of where we should be." "That's impossible," Vera said, coming to look over my shoulder. "We followed the trail exactly." "Maybe the GPS is glitching," Cameron suggested, pulling out his own device. He frowned. "Mine says we're a mile west of the trail." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Let's check the physical map." The map revealed a third different location. According to it, we were right where we'd intended to be. "Technology fails sometimes," Sophia said practically. "We stick with the map and compass." We agreed to continue as planned, a day hike to Red Creek Canyon, then back to camp. I found myself feeling grateful that we'd need to leave a day early due to the food situation. Something about this place felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. As we prepared for our day hike, Eli suddenly barked sharply, his alert bark. We all turned to see what had caught his attention. "What the hell?" Liam whispered. On a large sycamore tree at the edge of our camp, about 7 feet up the trunk, was a crude symbol carved into the bark. It looked fresh, the exposed inner wood still light in color. The symbol resembled a vertical eye with strange markings around it. "That wasn't there yesterday," Cameron said, voice shaking slightly. "Maybe we just didn't notice it," Sophia suggested, but she sounded uncertain. I approached the tree, examining the carving. "This is fresh, still bleeding sap." I touched the mark and immediately withdrew my finger. The wood was warm, warmer than it should have been in the cool morning air. "Let's go," Vera said firmly. "Now. Day hike, then we come back, pack up, and leave first thing tomorrow." No one argued. The hike to Red Creek Canyon should have taken 2 hours according to the map. 4 hours later, we still hadn't reached it. The trail seemed to shift subtly, never quite matching what was indicated on our map. "We should have hit the canyon overlook by now," Liam said, consulting the map for the dozenth time. I checked my watch, 11:47 a.m. Then I noticed Cameron checking his. "What time do you have?" I asked him. He frowned. 2:23 p.m. That can't be right. We all checked our devices. Each showed a different time despite having been synchronized the day before. "This is getting weird," Sophia said, voicing what we were all thinking. "Let's head back to camp," I suggested. "We can pack up and start hiking out this afternoon." Everyone quickly agreed. We turned around, following our own footprints back the way we'd come. But an hour later, none of the landmarks we'd passed earlier looked familiar. "This doesn't make sense," Vera said, stopping suddenly. "We should have reached that distinctive rock formation by now." "Maybe we took a wrong turn," Cameron suggested, though we'd been careful not to. "Impossible," Liam insisted. "We've been following our own tracks." I looked down. The path beneath our feet was clear of footprints now, though we'd been leaving distinct marks in the soft earth just minutes before. A sense of dread settled over the group. Eli pressed against my leg, whining softly. "New plan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The main trail runs north-south. If we head due east, we'll hit it eventually. Then we can follow it back to the trailhead." Vera took out her compass. We all watched as the needle spun lazily, never settling. "That's not possible," she whispered. It was Cameron who spotted it first, another carved symbol, identical to the one at our camp on a tree about 30 feet away. Then we noticed another, and another. They formed a rough circle around us. "We need to get out of here," Sophia said, her practical demeanor cracking slightly. "Now." "Which way?" Liam asked, turning in a full circle. Every direction looked the same. Endless trees, their autumn colors suddenly seeming less beautiful and more like a warning sign. I made a decision. We follow the sun. West. It's afternoon, so the sun is in the western sky. We keep it in front of us. It seemed to work at first. We moved with purpose, pushing through underbrush when necessary, checking the sun's position constantly. But after what should have been enough time to cross the entire wilderness area, we emerged into a familiar clearing, our campsite. Everything was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Our tents still stood. The scattered rotted food still lay on the ground. It was as if we'd been walking in a perfect circle all day. "This isn't possible," Cameron said, voice rising with panic. "We walked straight west for hours," Eli growled, facing the northern edge of the clearing, the same spot he'd been watching since we arrived. But this time, I saw what had caught his attention. Just at the edge of visibility, partially hidden by a large rhododendron, stood what appeared to be the remains of a small cabin. "Was that there before?" I asked, pointing. Everyone turned to look. "No way we would have missed that," Liam said, already moving toward it. "Liam, wait," Sophia called, but he was already crossing the clearing. The rest of us followed reluctantly, Eli staying unusually close to my side. The cabin was ancient, little more than a stone foundation and partial log walls collapsed on one side. It might have been abandoned for a century or more. What made us all stop short was the collection of objects hanging from the broken rafters. Small bundles of sticks bound with what looked like human hair, animal bones arranged in patterns, and small cloth dolls with crude facial features. "We should go," Cameron whispered. "Now." For once, no one argued with him. We backed away from the cabin remains and returned to our campsite. "Let's pack up and try to hike out before dark," Vera suggested, her military training taking over. "Stick together, keep the sun at our backs until we hit the main trail." We quickly broke down the tents and packed our gear. The sun was lowering toward the horizon. According to my watch, it was 4:30 p.m., giving us maybe 3 hours of daylight. Cameron's watch read 11:22 a.m., Vera's 7:15 p.m., Sophia's 3:03 a.m., and Liam's had stopped altogether. Just as we were about to leave, Liam realized we needed more water for the hike out. "I'll fill the bottles at the stream," he offered. 2 minutes. "I'll go with you," Sophia said quickly. "No need," he replied. "Faster if I just go." Before anyone could object, he grabbed our 4 water bottles and jogged toward the small stream about 50 yards from camp. We watched him go, then continued securing our packs. 10 minutes passed, then 15. "The stream is right there," Vera said, pointing. "What's taking so long?" "I'll check," I said, suddenly uneasy. "Eli, come." The dog and I walked to the stream. There was no sign of Liam. The water bottles lay scattered on the bank, only one of them filled. "Liam," I called, my voice sounding small in the vast wilderness. "Liam!" No response. I ran back to the others. "He's gone. Water bottles are there, but no sign of him." Panic erupted. We spread out in a careful search pattern, calling Liam's name, checking every possible place he could have gone. After 30 fruitless minutes, we regrouped. "This doesn't make sense," Sophia said, tears of frustration in her eyes. "He wouldn't just wander off." "We need to," Cameron began, but stopped abruptly, staring over my shoulder. I turned. Liam was walking toward us from the direction of the cabin ruins, water bottles in hand, smiling. "Sorry about that," he said casually. "Thought I saw something interesting." Relief washed over us, but it was short-lived. As Liam drew closer, Eli began to growl, backing away, hackles raised. "Eli, what's wrong?" I tried to calm him, but he continued growling at Liam. Something was off. Liam's movements were slightly wrong, too fluid, as if his joints worked differently now, and his smile never wavered, never reached his eyes. "Got the water," he said, holding out the bottles. They were all filled now. "We should go. It's getting dark." He was right about that, at least. The sun was sinking rapidly. "Where did you go?" Sophia asked, taking a bottle cautiously. "We were worried." "Just exploring," Liam replied, still smiling that fixed smile. "This place is fascinating." We hesitantly shouldered our packs and began hiking in the direction we believed would lead to the main trail. Liam took the lead, moving with an energy that seemed impossible after our exhausting day. Eli refused to walk near him, staying by my side at the back of the group. "Something's wrong with him," I whispered to Vera, who had dropped back to walk with me. "Post-traumatic stress," she suggested. "Maybe he fell or had a scare and he's compensating." "No," I insisted. "It's something else. Eli knows it too." The light faded quickly as we hiked, shadows lengthening, the forest transforming around us. And then I noticed something chilling. We were passing the same distinctive cluster of rocks we'd seen an hour earlier. We were walking in circles again. "Liam," I called, "we're going the wrong way." He stopped and turned, that unnatural smile still fixed on his face. "No, this is right. I know exactly where we're going." "We've passed this formation before," Cameron pointed out. "We're walking in circles." "No," Liam said, his voice subtly different now, slightly deeper, resonant in a way that made my skin crawl. "I'm taking you where you need to go." Sophia approached him, placing a hand on his arm. "Liam, honey, are you feeling okay? You seem different." The change was instant. Liam's face contorted, his smile stretching impossibly wide, eyes suddenly bloodshot. He grabbed Sophia's wrist with unnatural strength. "Don't touch me," he growled, voice no longer entirely his own. Eli barked furiously, lunging forward. I barely held him back. "Let her go," Vera demanded, stepping forward. Liam released Sophia's wrist and laughed, a horrible sound that echoed strangely among the trees. "You should have stayed away from here," he said. "This place isn't for you." "What happened by the stream?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What happened to you?" His head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I saw her. Old Hester. She showed me the truth about this place, about all of you." "Liam, this isn't funny," Sophia said, backing away from him. "Not Liam anymore," he replied, voice dropping to a whisper. "Liam saw what's in the hollow beneath. He didn't like it." A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying what sounded like distant laughter. "We need to leave," Cameron said, panic evident in his voice. "Now." "You'll never leave," not Liam said with certainty. "She won't let you. This is her place. You're marked now." He pointed to our hands. With growing horror, I saw what he meant. Each of us had the same symbol that had been carved into the trees marked on our palms in what looked like mud. I hadn't noticed it before, had no memory of it appearing. In the fading light, Liam's face seemed to shift, features sliding subtly out of alignment. "Night is coming," he said, smiling again. "She walks at night." "Run," I said quietly to the others. "Back to camp. Now." We turned and fled, all except Sophia, who hesitated, unwilling to abandon Liam. "Sophia, come on," Vera shouted. "He needs help," Sophia insisted. "That's not Liam anymore," I told her, grabbing her arm. "We need to go." As if to emphasize my point, Liam began to laugh again, that horrible, echoing laugh that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Sophia finally turned and ran with us. We crashed through the underbrush, no longer caring about direction, just putting distance between ourselves and whatever Liam had become. Eli ran ahead, guiding us. Somehow, miraculously, we emerged back into our clearing. The remains of our camp were still there. We hadn't fully packed everything before Liam disappeared. "Grab the emergency shelter," Vera commanded, "and the flare gun." We quickly salvaged what we could. I could hear movement in the forest around us. Too much for just one person. "What's the plan?" Cameron asked, voice shaking. "Fire," I said suddenly, remembering something I'd read once about the legends of the area. Old Hester was afraid of fire. Most witch legends include that element. We hurriedly built up the remains of our morning campfire, using everything flammable we could find. Vera produced a lighter, and soon flames were leaping into the darkening sky. "Form a circle," she instructed. "Back to back." We stood around the fire, facing outward, listening as the sounds of movement closed in around us. Night had fully fallen now, the darkness beyond our firelight absolute. "Liam, is that you?" Sophia called, voice breaking. "Please, come back to us." A shape emerged from the darkness. Liam, but his movements were even more wrong now, jerky and disjointed, as if he were a puppet on strings. His eyes reflected the firelight like an animal's. "Poor lost lambs," he said, but the voice was higher now, crackling like dry leaves. "Come to old Hester's woods to play." Behind him, more shapes appeared, indistinct in the darkness but moving with the same unnatural gait. I caught glimpses of faces, some animal, some human, all wrong somehow. "Stay back," I warned, brandishing a flaming branch. Eli snarled beside me, a sound I'd never heard him make before. Liam, or what used to be Liam, stopped at the edge of the firelight. "The hollow beneath is hungry," he said. "She is hungry. She's been waiting so long." "What do you want?" Vera demanded. A terrible smile spread across Liam's face. "Everything." He lunged forward with impossible speed, directly at Sophia. Cameron shoved her aside and took the brunt of the attack, screaming as Liam's now clawed hands raked across his chest, tearing through his jacket and the flesh beneath. Vera reacted immediately, swinging a heavy branch at Liam's head. It connected with a sickening thud, but he barely seemed to notice. He turned toward her, neck craning at an impossible angle. I thrust my flaming branch at him. He hissed and backed away from the fire, but his eyes remained fixed on us, calculating. "The symbols," I said suddenly, remembering the marks on our hands. "Wash them off." Sophia reacted first, grabbing her water bottle and pouring it over her palm, scrubbing frantically. The mark smeared, but didn't disappear entirely. Cameron lay on the ground, blood seeping through his torn clothing. Vera crouched beside him, keeping one eye on the ring of shadows that surrounded us. "We need to get out of here," she said. "Now." "We'll never find the trail in the dark," I replied. "We need to hold out until morning." A low chuckle came from the darkness, not from Liam's direction, but behind us. "Morning never comes for those who bear the mark," a woman's voice said, dry and ancient as dust. I whirled around. At the edge of the firelight stood a figure that could only be old Hester, an impossibly tall, gaunt woman in tattered frontier clothing, her face a skull-like mask of wrinkled skin stretched over bone, eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence. "Stay back," I commanded, thrusting the flaming branch toward her. She smiled, revealing blackened teeth. "Fire cannot harm me, boy. This is my place. You trespassed. Now you pay the toll." "What toll?" Sophia demanded, still scrubbing at the mark on her hand. Old Hester's gaze shifted to her. "Life. Blood. Soul. The hollow beneath demands feeding." As she spoke, the ground beneath our feet seemed to shift slightly, as if something massive moved far below. Liam suddenly convulsed, falling to his knees. His body began to twist, bones cracking audibly as they rearranged themselves. "Oh God," Sophia whispered, reaching toward him instinctively. "Don't," I grabbed her arm. "That's not Liam anymore." Old Hester raised her arms and the shadows around us surged closer. I caught glimpses of their true forms now, twisted amalgamations of human and animal features, some with too many limbs, others with skin that seemed to flow like wax. "The hollow has been here since before your kind," old Hester rasped. "It hungers always. In my life, I fed it. In death, I am its servant." Cameron groaned, trying to sit up despite his injuries. "The flare gun," he gasped. "Use it." Vera pulled it from her pack, loaded it with steady hands despite the horror around us. She aimed it directly at old Hester and fired. The red flare struck the witch in the chest, igniting her tattered clothing instantly. She shrieked, an inhuman sound that made my ears ring, and began to burn with unnatural intensity. The shadows around us recoiled from the sudden light. "Run!" I shouted. "Now!" Vera helped Cameron to his feet while Sophia and I grabbed what supplies we could. Together, we plunged into the darkness beyond the clearing, away from the burning figure. Eli led the way, his superior night vision guiding us through the trees. Behind us, old Hester's screams continued, joined by other voices, including one that sounded horribly like Liam. We ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks, branches whipping at our faces. I had no idea if we were heading toward the trail or deeper into the wilderness. All that mattered was distance. After what felt like hours, Cameron collapsed, unable to continue. His wounds were severe, and he'd lost too much blood. We stopped in a small hollow formed by the roots of a massive fallen oak. "We need to treat these," Vera said, examining Cameron's injuries by the light of her headlamp. Her face was grim. "How bad?" he asked weakly. She didn't answer, just began cleaning the wounds with supplies from her first aid kit. The claw marks were deep, running from his collarbone to his waist. "Anything?" Sophia asked, looking at her palm. We'd all tried to wash away the marks, but they remained, fainter but still visible. "We need to keep moving as soon as Cameron can," I said, checking on Eli. The dog was alert, ears swiveling constantly, monitoring our surroundings. "What about Liam?" Sophia asked, voice small. None of us answered. We all knew the truth. Cameron's condition worsened over the next hour. His breathing became labored, his skin pale and clammy. Vera did everything she could, but we all knew he needed a hospital. "The marks," he said suddenly, looking at his palm. "They're connected to her, to the hollow." "Save your strength," Vera told him, squeezing his hand. "No. Listen," he insisted. "I understand now. The symbols, they're a binding, a contract. She marks those who enter her territory, claims them." "How do you know this?" I asked. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "I can hear her, in my head. She's so hungry, Mason. So old. So hungry." Eli growled suddenly, facing the direction we'd come from. In the distance, I could hear movement through the underbrush. Deliberate. Searching. "They're coming," Sophia whispered. Cameron's grip on my wrist tightened. "The symbols have to be broken," he said urgently. "Not washed away. Broken." "How?" I asked. His eyes rolled back briefly before refocusing. "Iron. Cold iron breaks old magic. Everyone knows that." It was a desperate, irrational thought, but we were beyond rational explanations now. "My knife," Vera said, pulling out her tactical folding knife. "Steel with high iron content." One by one, we scraped the symbols from our palms using the knife's edge, drawing blood in the process. It was painful, but nowhere near as terrifying as what pursued us. Cameron went last. As Vera carefully broke the symbol on his palm, he shuddered violently, then went still. "Cameron," she called, shaking him gently. "Cameron." There was no response. She checked for a pulse, then sat back, tears streaming silently down her face. "He's gone," she said simply. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. We had no time to mourn. "We have to move," I said, hating myself for the words. "We can't help him now." "We're not leaving him," Vera said, voice cracking with emotion. "He's my husband." "Vera," Sophia said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He's gone. And whatever's coming—" "I know," Vera interrupted, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know, but we're not leaving him for her." She looked up, a new determination in her eyes. "We're taking him with us." Between the three of us, we managed to fashion a makeshift stretcher using branches in our jackets. It was awkward and would slow us down considerably, but none of us could bear the thought of leaving Cameron's body behind for whatever horror pursued us. As we prepared to move, Eli's growls intensified. I aimed my flashlight in the direction he was facing and caught a glimpse of movement. A tall, skeletal figure moving with unnatural speed between the trees. "Go," I hissed. "Now." We moved as quickly as we could with our burden, heading downhill on the assumption that it would eventually lead us to a stream, which might lead to the main trail. The forest seemed to work against us, branches reaching like fingers, roots rising to trip our feet, the ground itself becoming treacherously uneven. Behind us, old Hester's voice carried on the wind. "The mark endures," she called. "The hollow claims its due." Sophia stumbled suddenly, crying out in pain. I turned to see her clutching her hand, the hand where the symbol had been. Blood seeped between her fingers. "It's burning," she gasped, "like acid." We paused long enough to check. All our palms were bleeding again, the symbols reforming in the wounds despite our attempts to destroy them. "Keep moving," Vera ordered, adjusting her grip on the stretcher. Her military training was asserting itself, focusing her grief into action. The downhill slope grew steeper, more treacherous. We were forced to abandon the stretcher, with Vera and I carrying Cameron's body between us instead. Every few minutes we'd catch glimpses of our pursuers, sometimes old Hester's skeletal form, sometimes the twisted thing that had once been Liam, sometimes other figures too horrific to comprehend. After what felt like hours, we reached a small stream, its water black in the darkness. "Follow it downstream," I suggested. "It has to lead somewhere." We had gone perhaps half a mile along the stream when Eli suddenly stopped, refusing to move forward. His hackles were raised and a continuous low growl rumbled from his chest. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, aiming my flashlight ahead. The beam revealed what had stopped him. The stream disappeared into a small cave mouth in the hillside. Above the entrance, carved into the stone, was the same symbol that marked our palms. "We can't go in there," Sophia said, backing away. "We can't go back either," Vera pointed out, glancing over her shoulder. I listened carefully and could hear movement in the forest behind us. They were closing in. "The symbols," I said suddenly. "They're connected to old Hester, but they're not hers originally. Cameron said the hollow demands feeding. I think she's just its servant." "What are you saying?" Sophia asked. "I'm saying maybe the only way out is through." I pointed at the cave. "This might lead to the hollow she keeps talking about. Maybe that's where we need to go to end this." "Or maybe that's exactly where she wants us to go," Vera countered. A scream echoed through the forest behind us. Inhuman, filled with hunger and rage. It was followed by the sound of running feet, many sets, coming rapidly closer. "No choice," I said. "In, now." Reluctantly, we entered the cave, the cold stream water soaking our boots. Eli whined but followed, staying close to my side. The cave mouth was barely tall enough to stand in, and we had to crouch awkwardly as we carried Cameron's body. The passage descended steeply, following the stream's course. Our flashlights created grotesque shadows on the wet stone walls. The air grew colder, damper, with an unpleasant metallic smell that reminded me of blood. "Mason," Sophia whispered. "Look." She aimed her light at the wall beside us. More symbols were carved into the stone, hundreds of them, overlapping in places, some ancient and worn, others freshly cut. Many resembled the mark on our palms, but others were different. Spirals, eyes, angular lines forming complex patterns. "These go back centuries," I said, examining the carvings. "Different styles, different periods. Some of these don't look human," Vera observed, pointing to a section where the symbols were unnaturally precise, with geometries that hurt the eye to follow. The passage widened suddenly, opening into a large chamber. Our flashlights couldn't penetrate to the far walls, but they revealed enough. A natural amphitheater, the stream flowing into a dark pool at its center. The air was unnaturally still, heavy with that metallic scent. We carefully set Cameron's body down near the chamber entrance. Vera knelt beside him, touching his face gently one last time. "What now?" Sophia asked, her voice barely audible in the vast space. Before I could answer, a voice echoed from the darkness. Old Hester's dry, ancient tones. "You've come home," she said, stepping into the edge of our light. "All who bear the mark must return to the hollow. It is the way." She looked different here, less human, her proportions wrong, limbs too long, neck bent at an impossible angle. Behind her, more shapes moved in the darkness, dozens of them. "What is this place?" I demanded, keeping my light trained on her. Eli pressed against my leg, trembling but still growling. "The hollow beneath," she replied, gesturing to the pool at the center of the chamber. "The hunger below. It was here before your kind walked upright. It will remain when you are dust." As if in response to her words, the water in the pool began to stir, bubbling gently. A soft blue glow emanated from its depths. "The mark calls you to it," old Hester continued. "The mark binds you to its hunger. You cannot resist." To my horror, I realized she was right. My hand, the one bearing the symbol, was moving of its own accord, reaching toward the pool. Beside me, Sophia and Vera were experiencing the same phenomenon, fighting against their own rebellious limbs. "What does it want?" Sophia asked, strain evident in her voice as she fought to control her arm. Old Hester's face split in a terrible grin. "Everything. It feeds on life, on soul, on memory. It has fed for millennia. First on the animals of this land, then on the native tribes, then on the settlers. I was its willing servant in life. In death, I am its voice. Liam, Vera said suddenly. Where is he? A horrible sound, half laugh, half sob, came from the darkness behind old Hester. Liam stepped into the light, but he was barely recognizable now. His body was distorted, joints bending in wrong directions, skin stretched and pale. Only his eyes remained his own, and they were filled with agony. "Help me," he whispered, his voice the only part of him still human. "Please." Sophia made a broken sound, tears streaming down her face. "Liam." "The Hollow already has him," old Hester said dismissively, "as it will have all of you." The pull on my marked hand intensified. I could feel my feet taking involuntary steps toward the pool. Beside me, Sophia and Vera struggled against the same compulsion. In that moment of desperate clarity, I remembered something my grandfather once told me about old magic, that the most potent force against ancient evil is willing sacrifice. A gift freely given has power that no compulsion can match. "Vera," I said quietly, "the flare gun. Do you have any more flares?" She nodded minutely, still fighting against the pull of the mark. "1. When I say, fire it into the pool." "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked, eyes wide with fear. I looked down at Eli, my faithful companion for 6 years. In that moment, I knew he understood. Animals always sense these things before humans do. I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his neck for what I knew would be the last time. "I'm sorry, boy," I whispered. "Take care of them." He whined softly, licking my face. Then I stood, facing old Hester and the pool. "You want a sacrifice?" I called out. "The Hollow wants feeding? Fine. I offer myself freely. Not taken, not compelled, given." Old Hester's expression shifted to one of confusion, then suspicion. "The Hollow takes, it does not receive." "Not this time," I said, and before I could reconsider, I stepped forward, plunging into the glowing pool. The water was not water at all. It was thick, viscous, burning cold against my skin. As I sank into it, I could feel it entering me, probing, searching for something to consume, but I focused my entire will on one thought. I choose this. I give this. I am not taken. From somewhere far away, I heard Vera shout, "Now!" followed by the distinctive whoosh of the flare gun firing. A moment later, the world exploded into red light and searing heat. The Hollow beneath screamed. Not a sound, but a feeling. A psychic howl of rage and pain that reverberated through my very being. I was burning, dissolving, my consciousness fragmenting into countless shards. Yet somehow, through the pain and dissolution, I felt a deep satisfaction. The Hollow had fed on fear for centuries. It had no defense against willing sacrifice. The last thing I remembered was Eli's mournful howl echoing through the chamber, and the hope that the others would escape. I should have died in that cavern beneath Dolly Sods. By all rights, I did die. Yet, somehow, 3 days later, search and rescue found me miles from the cave, unconscious but alive, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Sophia and Vera were with me, both in similar states of exhaustion and confusion. Eli sat guard over us, refusing to let the rescuers approach until they proved themselves human to his satisfaction. Liam's body was never found. Neither was Cameron's. The official report listed them as missing, presumed dead from exposure and animal attacks. The cave we described could not be located, despite extensive searching. The symbols that marked our palms faded to faint white scars, visible only in certain light. We never speak of what happened, not even among ourselves. Some horrors are best left buried, but sometimes, in my dreams, I return to the Hollow beneath. I feel its hunger, its ancient malevolence, and I know it's still there, waiting beneath the wilderness of Dolly Sods, waiting for new victims to mark, waiting to feed. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear, I can hear old Hester's dry, ancient voice whispering among the trees. The hollow endures. The hollow remembers. The hollow hungers still. My name is Mason Wells. This happened in October 2024, and not a day goes by that I don't think about it. Some nights, I still wake up thinking I can hear her whispers carried on the wind. My name is Daniel Harmon. I'm 34 years old. This happened in October 2022. I still wake up screaming. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. The way the birds suddenly stopped singing when we stepped onto that unmarked trail. The strange carvings on the trees that didn't match any official trail blazes. The way my compass needle spun erratically despite no apparent electromagnetic interference. But when you've been planning a hiking trip to Monongahela National Forest for months with your best friends from college, you don't let little oddities derail your adventure. There were 5 of us, me, Owen Moore, Liam Weber, Ethan Caldwell, and Jack Preston. We'd been friends since freshman year at West Virginia University, bonding over our shared love of the outdoors. Now, in our mid-30s with demanding careers scattered across different states, our annual wilderness excursion was the one time we could reconnect, away from the distractions of everyday life. This year, we'd chosen a remote section of the Seneca Creek backcountry in the Monongahela National Forest. The area was known for its pristine wilderness, rugged terrain, and relative isolation, perfect for 5 friends looking to challenge themselves and escape civilization for a week. Owen was our unofficial leader, a wilderness guide in Colorado with an encyclopedic knowledge of survival techniques. Tall and lean with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, he approached everything with meticulous planning and calm confidence. Liam was the joker of our group, always ready with a quip to lighten the mood. Despite his carefree attitude, he was an experienced rock climber who could navigate vertical surfaces with impressive ease. Ethan was the intellectual, a biology professor who could identify virtually any plant or animal species we encountered. Quiet and observant, he often noticed things the rest of us missed. Jack was the newest addition to our core group, having joined us in junior year. A former college athlete turned pharmaceutical sales rep, he was physically imposing and fiercely competitive, always pushing us to go further and faster. And then there was me, Daniel. I worked as an IT consultant in Philadelphia, spending too many hours in front of screens and not enough in the natural world. These annual trips were my lifeline to sanity. We started our hike on a crisp Monday morning in early October. The fall colors were at their peak, a kaleidoscope of red, orange, and gold spreading across the mountainsides. The weather forecast predicted clear skies for most of the week, with temperatures dropping into the low 40s at night. Perfect hiking conditions. Our plan was ambitious. A 6-day loop covering nearly 50 miles of backcountry trails, including a climb up to Spruce Knob, West Virginia's highest peak. We'd camp at different sites each night, traveling light but carrying enough supplies to be self-sufficient. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. We covered good distance, setting up camp at designated backcountry sites, swapping stories around the campfire and falling asleep under star-filled skies. It was everything we'd hoped for. Challenging physical exertion during the day followed by peaceful communion with nature at night. On the 3rd day, everything changed. We were following the Seneca Creek Trail when Owen spotted what appeared to be an unmarked path branching off to the east. It wasn't on our maps, but it seemed to lead toward a ridgeline that would offer spectacular views. "What do you guys think?" Owen asked, studying his topographic map with a furrowed brow. "This could be a good shortcut to tomorrow's campsite, plus we'd get some killer views." Jack was immediately enthusiastic. "Let's do it. I'm tired of following the same trails as every other hiker." Ethan was more cautious. "I don't know. Unmarked trails can be dangerous. There's usually a reason they're not on the map." "Come on, Professor," Liam teased. "Where's your sense of adventure? Owen knows what he's doing." I stood silently, feeling uneasy but unable to articulate why. Something about the trail entrance felt wrong. The way the surrounding vegetation seemed to bend away from it rather than encroach upon it, the unnatural stillness in the air. "Dan, you're the tiebreaker," Owen said. I hesitated, then shrugged. If Owen thinks it's safe, I'm in. And with that casual decision, we left the marked trail and headed into the unknown. The path was narrow but clearly defined, suggesting it had been used, albeit infrequently. As we progressed, the forest around us changed subtly. The trees grew closer together, their trunks darker and more gnarled. The underbrush thickened, occasionally scratching at our legs despite the clear path. After about an hour, I noticed the birds had gone silent. In a forest that should have been alive with the sounds of chickadees, nuthatches, and woodpeckers, there was nothing but the crunch of our boots on fallen leaves. "Anyone else notice how quiet it's gotten?" I asked. Ethan nodded. "I was just thinking that. No birdsong, no squirrels, not even insects." "Probably just the time of day," Owen said dismissively. "Let's keep moving. We want to reach the ridge before we lose too much daylight." We pressed on, the silence growing heavier. Then Liam called out, "Hey, check this out." He was pointing to a tree beside the trail, where a strange symbol had been carved into the bark, a crude figure that looked like a stick person with an oversized head and elongated limbs. "Native American, maybe?" Jack suggested. Ethan studied it carefully. "I don't think so. This doesn't match any indigenous symbolism I've seen, and it looks relatively fresh." "Probably just some kids messing around," Owen said, but I noticed him checking his GPS. "Weird, I'm not getting a signal here." "My phone's dead too," Liam added, holding up his device. "It was at 80% like 10 minutes ago." One by one, we discovered all our electronic devices had either died or were malfunctioning. Owen's GPS showed us in a completely different part of the forest. My compass spun wildly, never settling on a direction. "This is crazy," Jack said, a hint of concern creeping into his voice. "How are all our devices failing at once?" "Some kind of electromagnetic anomaly, maybe?" Ethan suggested. "This region has unusual geological features." "It doesn't matter," Owen insisted. "We can navigate the old-fashioned way. The sun's still visible. We keep it on our right and we'll be heading mostly north. The ridge should be just ahead." But the ridge wasn't just ahead. We hiked for another 3 hours, and the terrain remained stubbornly flat. The trail began to wind more erratically, sometimes doubling back on itself. The trees grew even denser, their canopies meshing together overhead until only occasional shafts of sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. And there were more carvings, dozens of them, all variations of that same unnerving stick figure. Some had multiple limbs, others had no features on their oversized heads. A few appeared to be holding smaller figures in their grasp. "We need to turn back," I finally said, voicing what I'd been thinking for hours. "This isn't right." "We can't just turn back," Jack argued. "We've been hiking for hours. The original trail is probably farther away than the ridge at this point." "Assuming the ridge is even there," Ethan muttered. "It's there," Owen insisted, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "Look, we've got maybe 2 hours of daylight left. We should find a suitable campsite and regroup in the morning." No one had a better suggestion, so we continued forward, now searching for a clearing large enough to accommodate our tents. When we finally found one, the relief was palpable. The small meadow was roughly circular, about 30 feet in diameter, with a fire ring of stones at its center. "People have camped here before," Liam said, his voice brightening. "That's a good sign, right?" "Definitely," Owen agreed, already shrugging off his backpack. "Let's set up camp while we still have light." We worked quickly, pitching our tents around the periphery of the clearing and gathering firewood. As darkness fell, Owen got a fire going, and we huddled around it, eating dinner in relative silence. The flames cast dancing shadows across our faces, highlighting the concern we were all feeling but reluctant to express. "So, what's the plan for tomorrow?" Liam finally asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Owen sighed. I think we need to retrace our steps, get back to the main trail. No one argued. Has anyone else noticed there are no animal sounds? Ethan asked quietly. No owls, no insects, nothing. Now that he mentioned it, the silence was deafening, an absolute vacuum of natural sound beyond the crackling of our fire. Even the breeze had died down, leaving the surrounding forest eerily still. Maybe they're avoiding the fire, Jack suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. I found something else today, Ethan continued, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small object and held it up to the firelight. It was a tiny figurine carved from dark wood, a miniature version of the stick figures we'd seen on the trees. Where did you find that? I asked, feeling my skin crawl. On the trail, about an hour before we found this clearing. It was just sitting there like someone had dropped it. Or left it intentionally, Liam muttered. Okay, let's not freak ourselves out, Owen said firmly. We're experienced hikers who took a wrong turn. It happens. Tomorrow, we'll get back on track. We tried to return to our usual campfire camaraderie, sharing stories and jokes, but our hearts weren't in it. One by one, we retreated to our tents, exhausted from the day's hike and unsettled by our surroundings. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, listening to the sporadic pop and hiss of the dying fire. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. Every snap of a twig in the darkness jolted me to alertness. Every rustle of the tent fabric and the occasional gust of wind sounded like whispered voices. I must have eventually drifted off because I was awakened by Jack's shout. Disoriented, I fumbled for my headlamp and checked my watch. It was 3:17 a.m. I unzipped my tent and emerged into the clearing. Jack was standing by the cold remnants of our fire, his headlamp illuminating the ground. What's wrong? Owen asked, emerging from his tent. My backpack, Jack said, his voice tight with anger and confusion. It's gone. Did you bring it into your tent? Liam asked, yawning as he joined us. No, I left it here by the fire. All my food was in there. My water filter, extra clothes. We searched the clearing with our headlamps, but Jack's backpack was nowhere to be found. Even more disturbing, there were no tracks leading away from our campsite. No sign of animal interference. Could you have moved it somewhere else? Ethan suggested, joining us from his tent. No, Jack insisted. I left it right here. He pointed to a spot beside the fire ring. Maybe an animal dragged it off, Owen suggested, though we all knew this was unlikely. The backpack was too heavy for most forest creatures, and again, there were no tracks. Let's look again in the morning, I said. We can share supplies until we get back to the main trail. No one slept much after that. We sat around the rekindled fire, taking comfort in its light and warmth, speaking little but drawing reassurance from each other's presence. When dawn finally came, filtering weakly through the dense canopy, we conducted a more thorough search of the area around our campsite. Jack's backpack remained missing, but Ethan made an even more disturbing discovery. A collection of those wooden figurines arranged in a circle around our clearing, just beyond the tree line. 20 of them placed at regular intervals as if standing sentinel. They weren't there yesterday, Ethan said quietly. I would have noticed. Someone put them there while we were sleeping, Liam concluded, voicing what we were all thinking. Or something, Jack muttered. Jack, we need to get out of here, I said firmly. Now. No one disagreed. We packed up quickly, distributing Jack's remaining gear among our packs. As we were about to leave, Owen paused at the trail entrance. Wait, he said, studying the ground. These aren't our tracks from yesterday. He was right. The path leading away from the clearing was different from the one we'd arrived on. Narrower, less defined, winding between trees that seemed even more densely packed than before. But this is the only trail, Jack said, frustration evident in his voice. Owen pulled out his compass, which was still spinning erratically. We came from the west. The sun rose over there, he pointed, so that's east. If we head west, we should eventually hit the main trail. "You want to go off trail?" Ethan asked skeptically. "Do you have a better idea?" Owen challenged. None of us did. So we set off, pushing through underbrush and weaving between trees, trying to maintain a westward heading. The going was slow and difficult. Branches seemed to reach out deliberately to snag our clothing. Roots rose unexpectedly from the ground, threatening to trip us. The terrain alternated between steep ascents and treacherous descents. After 2 hours of exhausting progress, we found ourselves in another clearing, smaller than the last. And in its center stood a crude structure, a shelter built from branches and animal hides stretched over a frame of saplings. "What the hell?" Liam whispered. "Hello," Owen called out. "Anyone there?" Silence answered him. We approached cautiously, Owen in the lead. The shelter was about 8 feet tall at its peak, large enough to accommodate several people. The entrance was a low opening that would require us to crawl to enter. "I'm going to check inside," Owen decided, handing his pack to Jack. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, but Owen was already approaching the entrance. He crouched down, shining his headlamp into the darkness. "There's no one here," he reported, "but someone's been living here." Despite my misgivings, curiosity drew me forward. I joined Owen at the entrance and peered inside. The interior was surprisingly spacious, with a dirt floor packed smooth by use. A bed of leaves and grass occupied one corner. Hanging from the ceiling framework were bundles of dried plants and what appeared to be animal parts, bones, feathers, strips of hide, but what captured my attention were the drawings that covered the interior walls. Hundreds of the same stick figures we'd seen carved into the trees, rendered in what looked like charcoal and red ochre. They depicted scenes of the figures hunting, dancing, and in one disturbing section, surrounding what were clearly meant to be human forms. "Guys," Ethan called from outside, "you need to see this." We backed out of the shelter to find Ethan standing at the edge of the clearing, examining something on a tree. As we approached, I saw it was another carving, but different from the others. This one showed 5 stick figures arranged in a row. "That's us," Liam said, his voice barely audible. 5 hikers." "This is someone's sick idea of a joke," Jack insisted, but his face had paled considerably. "We need to keep moving," Owen decided. "Stick together, stay alert." As we prepared to leave, I noticed something on the ground near the shelter entrance, a scrap of fabric that looked familiar. I picked it up and felt my blood run cold. It was a piece of the distinctive red nylon from Jack's missing backpack. I showed it to the others wordlessly. Jack snatched it from my hand, his expression a mixture of anger and fear. "Someone's messing with us," he said through gritted teeth. "Some backwoods freak is out there watching us right now, laughing at our confusion." "Jack," Owen said calmly, "we're going to get out of here, okay? But we need to stay focused." We left the clearing, still trying to maintain a westward direction, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. The forest seemed to shift around us, landmarks changing when we weren't looking directly at them. Twice we found ourselves walking in circles despite our best efforts. By midday, tensions were running high. Jack had become increasingly agitated, snapping at Liam when he suggested taking a break. Owen's confident demeanor had given way to grim determination. Ethan had grown quieter than usual, constantly scanning our surroundings. "We need water," I pointed out, checking my nearly empty bottle. We'd all been conserving since Jack had our main water filter in his missing pack, using the small backup filter to refill when we crossed streams. "There should be a creek nearby," Owen said, consulting his now useless map. "I can hear it." He was right. The faint sound of running water came from somewhere to our left. We altered course, pushing through a particularly dense section of underbrush before emerging onto the rocky bank of a small stream. The water ran clear and cold, tumbling over smooth stones. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a welcome sight, but what made us all freeze in place were the objects arranged along the opposite bank. 5 crude human effigies made from sticks and twine, each about 3 feet tall. 4 stood upright. The 5th lay broken on the ground, its head several feet away from its body. "That's it," Jack said, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm done with this game." He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted into the forest. "We know you're out there. Show yourself, you coward." His voice echoed through the trees, then faded into that unnatural silence. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, came a response. Not a human voice, but a sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. It was a high, undulating wail that started low before rising to a pitch that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. "What the hell was that?" Liam gasped. Before anyone could answer, the sound came again, closer this time. It wasn't just one voice, but many, overlapping and echoing through the trees. "Fill your water bottles," Owen ordered, his voice tight. "We're leaving. Now." We rushed to the stream, hastily filtering water to replenish our supplies. As I straightened up, something on the ground caught my eye, a set of tracks in the soft mud of the bank. They weren't human footprints, nor did they match any animal track I recognized. Each impression was nearly a foot long, with what looked like 6 elongated toe prints splayed at the front. "Owen," I called, pointing to the tracks. He examined them briefly, his expression unreadable. "Let's go," was all he said. We moved away from the stream at a pace just short of running, no longer concerned with direction, just wanting to put distance between ourselves and those eerie wails. The forest grew darker as clouds rolled in, obscuring the sun and making it even harder to navigate. After an hour of hard hiking, we paused in a small hollow to catch our breath. The wailing had stopped, but now the forest was filled with a new sound, rhythmic thumping, like multiple objects striking trees in unison. It started behind us and then encircled our position, coming from all directions at once. "They're surrounding us," Ethan whispered. "Who's they?" Jack demanded, "because this isn't funny anymore." "I don't think it's meant to be funny," I said quietly. The thumping grew louder, more insistent. Then, on the ridge above us, something moved. Through the trees, I glimpsed a tall, thin figure, its proportions all wrong for a human. Its limbs were too long, its head too large and oddly shaped. It stood motionless, watching us. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. The others followed my gaze. The figure remained still for a moment longer, then retreated from view. "What was that?" Liam asked, his earlier joviality completely gone. "We need to find shelter," Owen decided. "It'll be dark soon, and we're not prepared to navigate at night." "What about the main trail?" Jack asked. "I don't think we're going to find it today," Owen admitted. "We need to focus on survival now." We continued moving, no longer certain of our direction but hoping to find suitable terrain for a defensible camp. The thumping followed us, sometimes fading only to resume with renewed intensity. Occasionally, we caught glimpses of movement among the trees, tall figures darting between trunks, always at the periphery of our vision. As dusk approached, the clouds thickened, bringing an early darkness to the forest. We finally found a small rise with a relatively flat top and fewer trees, offering better visibility of our surroundings. "This is it," Owen announced. "We make our stand here." We quickly established a camp, pitching our tents in a tight circle. Owen built a fire larger than necessary for cooking, creating a perimeter of light around us. We gathered extra firewood, enough to last the night if we were diligent. "We'll take watches," Owen instructed. 2 hours each. No one sleeps alone in their tent tonight. Jack and Liam would share one tent, Owen and Ethan another, leaving me to sleep in mine when not on watch. I volunteered for the first shift, settling beside the fire with my knife within easy reach. The others retreated to their tents, though I doubted anyone would sleep. I stared into the darkness beyond our firelight, straining my eyes and ears for any sign of approach. The thumping had stopped when we made camp, but the forest wasn't silent. There were whispers now, unintelligible but clearly vocal in nature, coming from just beyond the reach of our firelight. An hour into my watch, the whispers suddenly ceased. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I added more wood to the fire, watching the flames leap higher, pushing back the darkness a few more feet. Movement caught my eye. At the edge of the firelight, partially hidden behind a tree, stood a figure. It was tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed too long and jointed in the wrong places. Its skin was a pallid gray, stretched tight over a frame that only approximately resembled a human skeleton. But it was the head that made my breath catch. Elongated vertically, with a wide mouth that stretched from ear to ear, and eyes that reflected the firelight like a nocturnal animal's. I reached slowly for my knife, never taking my eyes off the creature. "Owen," I called softly toward his tent. "Owen, wake up." The creature tilted its head, studying me with those reflective eyes. Then it raised one long-fingered hand and beckoned to me. "Owen!" I called more urgently. The tent rustled as Owen emerged, followed quickly by Ethan. "What is it?" Owen asked, then fell silent as he spotted the creature. "What the hell is that thing?" Ethan whispered. The creature took a step forward, entering fully into the firelight. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, and emitted a sound that was almost a purr. Then it spoke, in a voice that sounded like stones grinding together. "Hungry," it rasped. "So hungry." Jack and Liam emerged from their tent, alerted by our voices. When Jack saw the creature, he reached for his hiking pole, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back," he shouted. The creature's head swiveled toward Jack, its mouth stretching into what might have been a smile. "Jack," it said, the name elongated and distorted. "We have your things, Jack." Jack's expression shifted from fear to confusion. "My backpack? You took it?" The creature nodded, an exaggerated motion that looked wrong on its misshapen body. "Come get it," it invited, backing away from the firelight and gesturing for us to follow. "Don't listen to it," I warned. "This is a trap." "Where is it?" Jack demanded, taking a step toward the creature. "Where's my pack?" "Jack, stop," Owen commanded. "Get back to the fire." But Jack was already moving forward, driven by anger and a desperate need to make sense of our situation. "I want my stuff back," he insisted. "I'm tired of this game." "This isn't a game," Ethan said softly. The creature retreated another step, still beckoning. Jack followed, now at the very edge of our firelight. "Jack!" Owen shouted. "Don't!" Too late. Jack lunged forward, swinging his hiking pole at the creature. It moved with shocking speed, sidestepping his attack and grabbing the pole with one hand. With its other hand, it seized Jack's wrist, yanking him forward into the darkness. Jack's scream was cut short. There was a brief sound of struggle, then silence. Owen grabbed a burning branch from the fire. "Stay here," he ordered the rest of us, then charged into the darkness after Jack. "Owen, wait," I called, but he was already gone. Liam, Ethan, and I huddled closer to the fire, backs to each other, watching the darkness for any sign of our friends. Minutes stretched agonizingly, filled only with the crackling of our fire and our own ragged breathing. Then came Owen's voice from the darkness. "Guys, I need help. Jack's hurt." I hesitated. The voice sounded like Owen's, but something was off. The cadence wrong, the tone too flat. "Owen," Liam called back. "I need help," the voice repeated. "Please." I grabbed Liam's arm as he started to move. "Wait," I whispered. "That doesn't sound right." Before Liam could respond, a figure staggered into the firelight. It was Owen, his face streaked with blood, his clothes torn. But it was his eyes that sent ice through my veins. They were empty, devoid of the intelligence and warmth I knew. He moved awkwardly, his gait uneven and jerky. "Owen?" Ethan asked cautiously. Owen's face split into a grin that was too wide, showing too many teeth. "Help me," he said, but his lips didn't move in sync with the words. "Jack is hurt." "That's not Owen," I said, my voice shaking. "Whatever it is, that's not him." The thing wearing Owen's face turned those empty eyes toward me. "Of course it's me, Daniel," it said. "Don't you recognize your friend?" It took another shambling step forward. Now I could see that Owen's neck was bent at an impossible angle, his head lolling to one side yet somehow still upright. "Where's Jack?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking. "Jack's waiting," not Owen said, the grin widening further. "He wants you to join him." Suddenly, from the darkness around us, came that wailing sound again, multiple voices rising and falling in that bone-chilling ululation. And with it came movement, shadowy figures emerging from the trees surrounding our camp. Dozens of them, all variants of the first creature, some taller, some more hunched, but all with those elongated heads and 2 long limbs. "We need to run," I said urgently. "Now!" Liam was frozen, staring at the thing that wore Owen's face. Ethan grabbed his arm, breaking his trance. "Liam, move!" We snatched up our backpacks, not bothering with the tents or other gear. The thing that wasn't Owen lunged suddenly, its movements no longer awkward but preternaturally fast. Its hands, no longer fully human, reached for Ethan with elongated fingers tipped with black claws. Ethan swung his backpack, catching the creature in the head and knocking it sideways. "Go!" he shouted. We ran, crashing through the underbrush away from the camp and the advancing creatures. Their wailing rose to a fever pitch, and the sound of pursuit erupted behind us. Branches snapping, leaves rustling, that uneven, loping gait gaining on us. I had no idea which direction we were running. All sense of orientation was lost in our blind panic. My lungs burned, and branches whipped at my face as I ran, but the terror propelled me forward. A scream behind me made me glance back. Liam had fallen, his ankle twisted on a hidden root. Ethan stopped to help him, but the creatures were closing in, their pale forms visible between the trees. I skidded to a halt, turning back toward my friends. "Leave me," Liam gasped, clutching his ankle. "I can't run." "We're not leaving anyone else," Ethan said firmly, pulling Liam's arm across his shoulders and lifting him to his feet. I rushed back to them, taking Liam's other arm. Together, we half-carried him forward, but our pace was painfully slow. The creatures would be upon us within minutes. "There!" I pointed ahead with my free hand. A dark opening was visible in the hillside, a cave entrance partially hidden by vegetation. We staggered toward it, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. The cave mouth was narrow but tall enough for us to enter without stooping. Inside, it widened into a chamber about 15 feet across, the ceiling lost in darkness above. The stone floor was smooth, worn by water over millennia. "We need to block the entrance," Ethan said, lowering Liam gently to the ground. We scrambled to pile rocks and dead branches across the opening, creating a flimsy barricade that wouldn't stop anything determined, but might slow our pursuers. When we'd done what we could, we retreated deeper into the cave, helping Liam to a relatively flat area where he could rest his injured ankle. I dug through my backpack, finding my headlamp and switching it on. The narrow beam revealed more of our surroundings, a natural limestone cavern that extended farther back into the hillside. Water trickled down one wall, collecting in a small pool before disappearing into a crevice in the floor. "Do you think they'll find us?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, "but at least we have a defensible position." Ethan was examining Liam's ankle, which had already swollen significantly. "It's a bad sprain," he reported. "He won't be running anytime soon." "What were those things?" Liam asked, wincing as Ethan manipulated his foot. "I don't know," Ethan repeated. "Nothing in any scientific classification I'm familiar with." "They knew Jack's name," I pointed out, "and they did something to Owen." I couldn't bring myself to describe what I'd seen. Owen's empty eyes, his broken neck somehow supporting a head that spoke with a voice not his own. "We need to get help," Ethan said, wrapping Liam's ankle with a bandage from his first aid kit. "Once it's light, one of us should try to find the main trail." "And leave the others here?" I asked skeptically. "We don't have many options, Dan." He was right. With Liam unable to walk and our supplies dwindling, we couldn't stay in the cave indefinitely. But the thought of venturing alone into the forest that had already claimed two of our friends was terrifying. We settled in to wait out the night, taking turns keeping watch near the barricaded entrance. The creatures didn't immediately pursue us into the cave, but we could hear them outside, moving through the undergrowth, occasionally emitting that chilling wail. During my watch, deep in the night, something approached our barricade. I heard the scrape of branches being moved and froze, my headlamp trained on the entrance. A figure appeared in the gap, not one of the creatures, but Jack. He looked relatively unharmed except for a gash on his forehead that had left a trail of dried blood down his face. His eyes were alert, his movements normal. "Jack?" I whispered, hardly daring to hope. "Dan," he responded, his voice urgent but seemingly his own. "Help me move this stuff. We need to get out of here." "What happened to you? Where's Owen?" Jack glanced over his shoulder nervously. "Owen's dead. Those things, they're all over the forest. But I found the trail. I can lead us out." Something felt wrong. Jack was too calm. His story too convenient. "How did you find us?" I asked, not moving to help him. "I followed your tracks," he said impatiently. "Come on, we don't have much time." I remained where I was. "Jack, what was the name of your first dog?" His expression flickered, confusion crossing his features. "What? Who cares about that right now? We need to go." "Answer the question," I insisted, my hand tightening on my knife. Jack's face contorted in frustration. "I don't have time for this. Get Liam and Ethan and let's go." Jack would know the answer, I said quietly. "You're not Jack." The thing wearing Jack's face went still. Then its mouth stretched into that same too-wide grin I'd seen on not Owen. "Clever boy," it said, its voice changing, becoming that same rasping growl. "But not clever enough." It lunged forward, pushing against our makeshift barricade. Branches snapped under its strength as it forced its way into the cave. I scrambled backward, shouting to wake Ethan and Liam. "They're coming in!" Ethan was on his feet instantly, helping Liam up. "Is there another way out?" he asked urgently. I swept my headlamp beam around the cave, looking for any other exit. At the back of the main chamber, the passage narrowed but continued deeper into the hillside. "There," I pointed. "That might lead somewhere." We retreated deeper into the cave, Liam hopping on one foot between us. Behind us, the not Jack broke through the last of our barricade, its form shifting as it entered the cave fully. In the beam of my headlamp, I saw Jack's features melting away like wax, revealing that same gray, elongated face beneath. The passage narrowed to the point where we had to proceed single file, with me in the lead, then Liam and Ethan bringing up the rear. The creature's rasping breath echoed behind us, punctuated by a sound like claws scraping on stone. "It's getting closer," Ethan warned. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow that we had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Water dripped from the ceiling, making the floor slick and treacherous. My headlamp beam revealed formations of stalactites and stalagmites, some meeting to form columns that we carefully navigated around. The sound of pursuit never faded. If anything, it multiplied, suggesting more creatures had entered the cave behind us. The passage abruptly opened into another chamber, larger than the first, with a ceiling that soared at least 30 feet above us. My headlamp couldn't illuminate the full extent of the space. The air felt different here, warmer and thick with an earthy, organic smell. "Do you smell that?" I asked. "Like something rotting," Liam confirmed, grimacing. We moved forward cautiously. The chamber floor was uneven, and in places, the stone gave way to patches of damp soil. As we ventured further, my headlamp beam caught something that made me stop short, a pile of backpacks and camping equipment. "That's my pack," Liam exclaimed, pointing. Sure enough, among the pile was Liam's distinctive blue backpack, along with Jack's missing red one, and what looked like dozens of others in various states of decay, some relatively new, others so old they had nearly disintegrated. "We're not the first ones they've led here," Ethan said quietly, but it wasn't just backpacks. As we approached, we saw clothing, hiking boots, cameras, and other personal effects scattered among the gear. And partially buried beneath it all, partially exposed by the disturbed earth, were bones. Human bones, yellowed with age but unmistakable. "Oh God," Liam moaned. "Keep moving," I urged, pulling him away from the grisly discovery. "There has to be another way out." We skirted the pile of belongings and bones, searching the perimeter of the chamber for another exit. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. They were in the narrow passage now, closing in. "There," Ethan pointed to a dark opening at the far side of the chamber. "Another tunnel." We hurried toward it, but before we could reach it, a figure emerged from the passage we'd just left, the creature wearing Jack's partially melted face. Behind it came more of the tall, gaunt figures, their eyes gleaming in the darkness as they entered the chamber. "Don't look back," I told Liam as we half-dragged him toward the new tunnel. "Just keep moving." But something else was emerging from the tunnel ahead of us. Another of the creatures, this one even taller than the others, its limbs impossibly long and spindly. It moved with a jerky, insectile gait, unfolding itself like some terrible spider as it blocked our escape. We were trapped between them, in a chamber filled with the remains of their previous victims. "What do we do?" Liam asked, his voice small with fear. I didn't have an answer. My mind raced, searching for options that didn't exist. The creatures were closing in from both directions, moving with that same unsettling combination of jerkiness and fluid grace. Their faces, if you could call them that, were expressions of hungry anticipation. The leader, the largest one that had emerged from the tunnel ahead, stepped forward. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling of the chamber, forcing it to stoop. When it spoke, its voice was deeper than the others, resonating in the cavern like distant thunder. "No more running," it said, the words distorted but understandable. "You belong to the Whispers now." "What are you?" Ethan demanded, surprising me with his boldness. The creature tilted its oversized head. "We are the hungry ones," it said. "The forgotten, the hollow people. We have been here since before your kind named these mountains." "What do you want from us?" I asked. "Want?" The creature's mouth stretched in that terrible smile. "We want what all hungry things want, to feed." The circle of creatures tightened around us. I gripped my knife, knowing it was useless against so many but unwilling to die without a fight. Ethan moved closer to Liam, trying to shield him. Then the leader raised one long-fingered hand, and the others stopped their advance. "But not yet," it continued. "First, you will join us, like your friends." It gestured, and from among the creatures stepped Owen and Jack, or what had once been Owen and Jack. Their forms had begun to change, their limbs elongating, their facial features distorting into something between human and the creatures surrounding us. But their eyes were the worst, vacant and reflective like polished stones. "What did you do to them?" I demanded. "We emptied them," the leader said simply. "Made room for the hunger to grow. Soon they will be hungry ones like us, and so will you." "You're insane," Ethan said. The creature laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Sanity is a human concept. We existed before such ideas." It took another step forward, its enormous frame looming over us. I raised my knife, but before I could strike, a new sound echoed through the chamber, a hollow, rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from the very rock around us. The creatures froze, their heads swiveling toward the sound. Even Owen and Jack's twisted forms responded, shrinking back. The leader hissed, a sound of displeasure or alarm. "The Deep Watcher stirs," it said. "It must not be disturbed." The pounding grew louder, shaking loose particles of stone from the ceiling. Small cracks appeared in the chamber walls, widening with each impact. The creatures began to retreat, moving back toward the passages they'd emerged from. "We must return to the upper darkness," the leader commanded. "Bring the humans." Several of the creatures lunged toward us. I slashed with my knife, catching one across what might have been a wrist. It recoiled, emitting a high-pitched shriek. Another grabbed for Ethan, who ducked and drove his shoulder into its midsection, knocking it back. The pounding intensified. Now the entire chamber was shaking, stalactites breaking free from the ceiling and crashing to the floor. A fissure opened in the wall nearest us, widening rapidly as the stones split apart. "The way out!" I shouted, pointing to the crack. "Come on!" We half-carried, half-dragged Liam toward the opening. Behind us, the creatures were in disarray, caught between pursuing us and fleeing the increasingly violent tremors. The leader was bellowing commands, its voice nearly drowned out by the thunderous pounding. The fissure was just wide enough for us to squeeze through if we went sideways. I helped Liam through first, then followed with Ethan close behind. We found ourselves in a natural corridor, the walls rough and unfinished compared to the main chamber. The passage sloped upward, which I took as a good sign. It might lead to the surface. The pounding continued behind us, but it was becoming more sporadic, the intervals between impacts growing longer. Whatever deep watcher the creatures feared seemed to be settling. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Liam asked as we paused to rest, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we can't stay here to find out." We continued upward, the passage gradually widening until we could walk normally. After what felt like hours but was probably no more than 30 minutes, we saw a hint of diffused light ahead, the gray of dawn filtering through an opening. The cave exit emerged halfway up a steep hillside, partially hidden by a stand of young hemlocks. We stumbled out into the early morning light, gulping fresh air that had never tasted so sweet. The forest around us seemed normal. Birds were singing, a squirrel chattered angrily at our intrusion, and a gentle breeze rustled the canopy overhead. But we were still lost, with Liam injured and no clear idea of which direction might lead to safety. "The sun," Ethan said, squinting at the sky through the trees. "That's east. The main trail should be west of us." It was as good a plan as any. We oriented ourselves and began the slow, painful journey westward, stopping frequently to rest Liam's ankle. The forest remained peaceful around us, showing no sign of the horrors we'd encountered. If not for Jack and Owen's absence, it might have been possible to believe we'd imagined it all. After several hours of difficult travel, we heard the most beautiful sound imaginable: human voices. We changed course toward them, shouting for help. Minutes later, we stumbled onto the main Seneca Creek Trail, where a group of day hikers spotted us and rushed to our aid. Our story, when we told it to the search and rescue team, was met with skepticism. We said we'd gotten lost, that Owen and Jack had gone ahead to find help and never returned. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, without the elements that would have made us sound delusional. They found our original campsite from the first 2 nights, but despite an extensive search, no trace of Owen or Jack was ever discovered. The authorities eventually concluded they'd fallen into a ravine or succumbed to exposure, their bodies hidden by the rugged terrain. Only Ethan, Liam, and I knew the truth, or some version of it. We spoke of it rarely in the months that followed and never in full. There were aspects of that nightmare that remained too terrible for words, details that would surface in our dreams but never in conversation. I've avoided the outdoors since then, finding excuses to cancel camping trips and hiking plans. Ethan threw himself into research, searching historical records and local legends for any mention of creatures matching what we'd seen. He found little beyond vague references in the journals of early settlers to hollow men in the deep woods and Native American warnings about hungry spirits that could wear the faces of loved ones. Liam moved away, cutting contact with both of us. I heard through mutual friends that he'd started drinking heavily, his once jovial personality replaced by paranoia and bouts of unexplained rage. As for me, I still wake in the night sometimes, my heart racing, convinced I've heard that high, undulating wail outside my window. On those nights, I lie awake until dawn, remembering the sound of claws on stone and the sight of familiar faces stretched into inhuman grins. I know they're still out there, the hungry ones, waiting in the dark places of the Monongahela National Forest, waiting for more lost hikers to stumble onto unmarked trails, waiting to feed. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if part of Owen and Jack still exists within whatever they've become, if some fragment of their consciousness remains trapped inside those twisted forms, aware but unable to control their actions. That possibility haunts me more than any other. So, if you're planning a hiking trip to the Appalachians, stay on the marked trails. Don't be tempted by unexplored paths or shortcuts, no matter how promising they appear. And if you find yourself in a section of forest where the birds have gone silent and the trees bear strange carvings, turn back immediately. Because the hungry ones are patient, and they are always, always hungry. My name is Morgan Fletcher. This happened in October of 2023. I used to think the worst thing about the wilderness was the isolation. Now I know better. It's not the isolation that kills you, it's what finds you when you're isolated. 6 months before our trip to the Monongahela National Forest, I'd been diagnosed with severe anxiety and burnout. Working 14-hour days as a software developer had hollowed me out. I barely spoke to Eliza anymore. Our apartment in Pittsburgh had become a prison of screens and deadlines. My therapist suggested disconnecting, really disconnecting, and spending time in nature. The forest doesn't demand anything from you, she'd said. It just lets you exist. She was wrong. The forest demands everything, and what lives there demands even more. Eliza thought the trip was a brilliant idea. She'd been trying to get me outdoors for years, away from the blue light of my monitors and the constant ping of notifications. As a nature photographer, she'd hiked most of the trails in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, but she'd never been to the remote eastern portions of Monongahela. We planned a 7-day trip, 4 days of hiking through the forest, ending at a cabin near Dolly Sod's wilderness where we'd spend the remaining 3 days. Just me, Eliza, and our golden retriever, Rusty. "It'll reset you," Eliza said, her green eyes bright with excitement as we packed our gear. "Trust me, Morgan, by day 3, you won't even remember what code looks like." She was right about that part, at least. By day 3, I couldn't remember much of anything from before. The forest has a way of making the outside world seem like a half-forgotten dream. We arrived at the Spruce Knob trailhead on a Tuesday morning. The October air was crisp but not yet bitter, leaves blazing red and gold against the deep green of the pines. Rusty bounded from the car, his tail whipping back and forth as he sniffed everything in sight. Eliza took photos of the sunrise breaking through the trees while I shouldered our packs. "Ready to disappear for a while?" she asked, slipping her camera into its waterproof case. I nodded, feeling the weight of the backpack settle against my spine. "Lead the way." The first day was everything the doctor ordered. We hiked about 8 miles along well-marked trails, Rusty running ahead and circling back as if checking that we were still following. The physical exertion burned away the fog that had surrounded my thoughts for months. We made camp in a small clearing near a stream, and I actually laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in forever as Rusty tried to catch minnows in the shallow water. That night, sleeping in our tent with the sounds of the forest around us, I dreamed of open spaces and endless skies. I woke, feeling lighter. "See?" Eliza whispered, her face illuminated by the soft glow of dawn filtering through the tent fabric. "The forest is healing you already." Day 2 started with a light drizzle that cleared by mid-morning, leaving everything smelling of wet earth and pine. We were heading deeper into the forest now, following a trail that would eventually connect to the paths around Seneca Rocks. According to our map, we'd camp that night near an old fire watchtower that had been abandoned decades ago. Round noon, our GPS started acting strangely. The screen would freeze, then jump to show us in completely different locations. "That's weird," Eliza frowned, tapping at her phone. "I've got full battery but no signal, and the GPS keeps glitching." "Mine too," I said, pulling out my own phone. The GPS app showed us about 2 miles east of where we should be, then suddenly jumped to show us 5 miles west. "Maybe it's the tree cover." Eliza shook her head. "I've hiked denser forest than this. Something's interfering with the signal." We decided to rely on our paper map and compass instead. Old-school navigation that wouldn't fail us. Except the map and the landmarks weren't quite matching up either. Ridges that should have been to our east seemed to be more to the north. A stream that should have crossed our path was nowhere to be found. "I think we should backtrack," I suggested as the afternoon wore on and the landscape became increasingly unfamiliar. Eliza studied the map one more time, her brow furrowed. "No, that tower should be just beyond that next ridge. We're close. Let's push on a bit further." Looking back, that was our first mistake, but I trusted Eliza's experience in the backcountry more than my own instincts. As dusk approached, the temperature dropped dramatically. What had been a mild October day suddenly felt like December, our breath fogging in front of us. And then the fog rolled in, not gradually but all at once, as if someone had pulled a thick white blanket over the forest. "This isn't right," Eliza murmured, pulling her jacket tighter. Weather forecasts didn't mention fog or this kind of cold front. We had no choice but to make camp where we were, in a small depression sheltered by a cluster of ancient pines. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of needles that at least provided some insulation from the increasingly cold earth. Rusty seemed agitated, pacing the perimeter of our campsite and occasionally growling at the wall of fog that surrounded us. "It's okay, boy." I tried to reassure him, but he wouldn't settle. His hackles remained raised, eyes fixed on the impenetrable white. We got the tent up quickly and started working on a fire. The wood we gathered was damp from the earlier rain and the sudden humidity, and it took much longer than it should have to get even a small flame going. I was feeding it carefully with strips of bark when Rusty's growl deepened into something I'd never heard from him before. "Someone's coming," Eliza whispered, nodding toward a subtle disturbance in the fog. A figure gradually materialized, a tall man in a Forest Service uniform. He carried a heavy backpack and hiking staff, his face weathered but friendly beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Evening, folks," he called out, stopping a respectful distance from our camp. "Nasty weather to be caught out in." I stood up slowly, positioning myself slightly in front of Eliza. Rusty's growl hadn't subsided. "Hello, are you a ranger?" The man nodded. "Thomas Holloway. I patrol this section of the forest." He gestured at our struggling fire. "Might want to use some of that fat wood there. It'll catch even in this damp." He pointed to a fallen pine a few yards away, and sure enough, when I broke off some of the resin-soaked inner wood, our fire leapt to life with barely any encouragement. "Thanks," I said, still wary despite his helpfulness. "We're a bit turned around. GPS is malfunctioning." Thomas smiled. "Technology often does out here. Something about the mineral deposits in these mountains." He pulled out a map far more detailed than ours. "You're here." He pointed to a spot that wasn't anywhere near where we thought we were, about 4 miles off the main trail. "That's not possible," Eliza said, looking from our map to his. "We've been following the trail markers all day." "Easy to get confused when the fog comes in," Thomas said mildly. "These woods have a way of turning folks around. You heading toward Dolly Sods?" We nodded. "Well, you're not far off course. I can point you in the right direction in the morning. For now, mind if I share your fire? I've been on patrol since dawn." Everything about the situation felt wrong. We were miles from where we should be. Our electronics were malfunctioning, and now this ranger appears out of nowhere offering help. But the temperature was still dropping, the fog growing thicker by the minute, and having someone who knew the area seemed like our best option. "Of course," Eliza said before I could object. "We'd appreciate the guidance." Thomas settled across the fire from us, his face transformed by the flickering light. For just a moment, a split second really, I thought I saw something else there, something hollow and hungry beneath his skin. But then he smiled, and he was just a weather-beaten forest ranger again. Rusty wouldn't go near him. Our normally friendly dog kept to the far side of the camp, eyes never leaving our visitor. "Not a dog person?" I asked, nodding toward Rusty's unusual behavior. Thomas shrugged. "Animals sense things differently than people do. Probably smells the other wildlife I've been around today." He pulled some beef jerky from his pack and offered us some. "Made it myself, local venison." The meat was oddly textured and had a gamey, almost rotten aftertaste, but we ate it to be polite. Thomas told us stories about the forest, old legends about settlers who disappeared, strange lights seen on distant ridges, voices heard calling from empty stretches of wilderness. "People say there are things in these woods that have been here since before the first humans arrived," he said, poking at the fire. "Things that don't like being disturbed?" "Like what?" I asked, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "Oh, all sorts of things in the old stories. Skin stealers, hollow walkers, creatures that can wear a human face." He laughed. "Just tales to keep kids from wandering off? Most likely." We turned in not long after, offering Thomas space in our tent that he politely declined, saying he preferred to sleep under the stars. I lay awake for hours, listening to Rusty's low, continuous growl from the foot of our sleeping bags. Eliza slept fitfully beside me, muttering in her dreams. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of running through endless trees, pursued by something that wore different faces. Sometimes Thomas, sometimes stranger things with too many joints and hollow eyes. I woke to Eliza shaking me urgently. "Morgan, wake up. Something's wrong." I sat up, instantly alert. The tent was bathed in gray morning light, but something was off about it. It seemed to flicker, like old fluorescent bulbs. "What time is it?" I asked, reaching for my phone. "That's just it. Eliza showed me her watch. According to this, it's 9:30, but my phone says 6:15, and the sun position looks like early morning. And..." She hesitated. "There's something outside." I crawled to the tent entrance and carefully unzipped it just enough to peer out. Thomas was gone. The fire, nothing but cold ashes. But arranged in a perfect semicircle around our tent were 7 dead rabbits, their bodies intact but completely drained of blood. Their eyes had been removed. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, quickly zipping the tent closed again. "Where's Rusty?" Eliza pointed to the lump of golden fur pressed against her side. Rusty was trembling, his eyes wide, teeth bared in a silent snarl directed at the tent wall. "We need to get out of here," I said, grabbing for my clothes. "Now. Pack only what we need." We dressed quickly, stuffing only essentials into our day packs. Water, some food, first aid, my hunting knife. I pulled back the tent flap again, steeling myself for the sight of the rabbits, but they were gone. Not a trace remained, not even depressions in the pine needles where they had lain. "They were there," Eliza insisted, her face pale. "I saw them too." "I believe you." I scanned the surrounding forest. The fog had thinned somewhat, but still hung between the trees like torn cobwebs. "Let's go. Keep Rusty close." We abandoned the tent and most of our gear, moving as quickly and quietly as possible through the forest. I had no idea which direction would lead us back to civilization, but away from here seemed like a good start. We'd gone perhaps half a mile when Thomas stepped out from behind a massive oak tree. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice friendly but his eyes cold. "I was just coming back to guide you to the main trail." "Where did you go this morning?" I demanded, keeping my distance. "Patrol rounds," he said easily. "Had to check some trail cameras nearby. Everything okay? You folks look spooked." "We found dead animals arranged around our tent," Eliza said. "Someone put them there overnight." Thomas frowned, looking genuinely concerned. "That's disturbing. We've had reports of some cult activity in these parts. Kids, mostly, doing rituals they read about online." He adjusted his hat. "All the more reason you should let me guide you back to safer ground. These woods aren't forgiving to those who don't know them." I didn't trust him, not after what we'd seen, But I also didn't know how to get us safely out of the forest. We were already lost, our navigation tools unreliable. If Thomas was what he claimed to be, we needed his help. If he wasn't, well, he already knew exactly where we were. "Fine," I said at last, "but we're keeping our distance." Thomas nodded amiably. "Suit yourself. We'll head east first, then cut north to connect with the main trail system. Should have you back in familiar territory by nightfall." As we followed him, maintaining a gap of at least 20 feet, I whispered to Eliza, "Keep your eyes on him. Anything strange, anything at all, and we run in different directions. He can't follow us both." She nodded, her hand tight around the trekking pole she was now wielding more like a weapon than a walking aid. Rusty stayed between us, his body language tense and alert. The day developed a dreamlike quality as we hiked. The forest seemed to shift around us, landmarks appearing and disappearing in ways that made no sense. Twice I was certain we passed the same distinctive lightning-struck tree, despite traveling in what Thomas assured us was a straight line. The light filtering through the canopy never changed, locked in perpetual early morning despite our watches insisting that hours were passing. Around what must have been midday, Thomas stopped in a small clearing bisected by a narrow stream. "Let's take a break," he suggested. "Refill water bottles. You must be hungry." We were, despite the wrongness of everything. We filtered water from the stream and ate some of the trail mix from our packs. Thomas offered us more of his jerky, which we politely declined. "Where exactly are we?" Eliza asked, studying her useless GPS. "About 3 miles from Junction Trail," Thomas said, pointing northeast. "Once we hit that, it's a straight shot to the ranger station at Seneca Creek." "That's not where we were heading," I pointed out. "We're supposed to go to Dolly Sod's." Thomas shook his head. "Too far now, given your detour. Better to get you to the ranger station, where you can arrange transportation to wherever you need to go." It made sense, but something about his tone set off alarm bells. When he stepped away to check the path ahead, I quickly whispered to Eliza, "We need a plan. I don't think he's taking us toward any ranger station." She nodded, her face drawn with fatigue and fear. "I've been trying to track the sun position. We're going in circles, Morgan. Sometimes wide, sometimes tight, but we're not making any real progress in any direction." Rusty whined softly, pressing against my leg. "We need to gather wood for tonight's fire," Thomas announced, returning suddenly. "Getting colder again." He turned to Eliza. "Mind helping me collect some? Your husband can set up a camp here." "I'll go," I said quickly. "Eliza can stay and get things ready." Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "2 people gather wood faster than 1. And no offense, but she looks like she knows more about proper firewood than you do." He turned to Eliza. "Right this way. Won't go far." Before I could object further, they were moving into the trees, Thomas leading Eliza toward a dense stand of pines some 50 yards away. I immediately began preparing a hasty camp, all while keeping them in sight. Rusty paced anxiously, whining whenever they disappeared momentarily behind trees. They were gone for 27 minutes. I know because I checked my watch obsessively, fighting the urge to go after them every time they vanished from view. When they finally returned, Eliza's arms were full of deadfall branches, and she seemed different. Her movements were slightly stiffer, her smile a bit too wide. "Found plenty," she said, her voice pitched just slightly higher than normal. "Let's get that fire going." As she bent to arrange the wood, I caught sight of something on the back of her neck, a small, circular mark that looked like a burn, fresh and raw. It hadn't been there that morning. Thomas kept his distance as I built the fire, his eyes never leaving Eliza. When she sat beside me, I whispered, "Are you okay? What happened out there?" "Fine," she said brightly. "Just gathered wood." "Why?" "You have a mark on your neck." Her hand flew up to touch it, then dropped away. "Oh, must have scratched it on a branch. Didn't even notice." But there was something mechanical about her response, her movements too precise. When Rusty approached her, his tail tentatively wagging, she didn't reach to pet him as she always did. Instead, she stared at him with what almost looked like confusion before remembering to extend her hand. Rusty backed away, hackles raised. That night was the longest of my life. We huddled by the fire while Thomas told more stories of the forest, darker ones now, about people found wandering with no memory of who they were, about hunters who shot at deer only to discover they'd killed their own companions, about the hollow sickness that made people empty themselves out to make room for something else. "The old-timers around here say you can tell who's got the hollow sickness," Thomas said, staring directly at me across the flames. "They smile too much. They forget how to act with their own dogs. They have marks where the emptiness got in." I felt cold despite the fire's heat. Beside me, Eliza smiled that too wide smile, her hand absently touching the mark on her neck. When she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Calculating, predatory, patient. When we finally retreated to our makeshift shelter, a crude lean-to built from branches since we'd abandoned our tent, I lay with my back against a tree trunk, Rusty pressed close to my side, watching Eliza pretend to sleep a few feet away. Thomas had again declined shelter, saying he preferred to keep watch. I must have drifted off despite my fear, because I jerked awake to find Eliza gone and Rusty standing at alert, staring into the darkness. I scrambled up, grabbing my knife. "Eliza!" I called softly. No answer. A distant scream tore through the night, definitely Eliza's voice but distorted by pain or fear or both. I plunged into the darkness toward the sound, Rusty bolting ahead of me. The forest seemed to twist and turn, branches reaching for me like hands, roots rising to trip my feet. Another scream, closer now, followed by a terrible wet sound I couldn't identify. I burst into a small clearing illuminated by moonlight that hadn't been penetrating the forest canopy minutes before. Eliza knelt in the center, her back to me, hunched over something on the ground. Rusty stood at the edge of the clearing, growling but not approaching. "Eliza?" She turned slowly, and in the moonlight I could see that her face was streaked with blood. At her feet lay a fawn, its chest cavity torn open, organs arranged in some kind of pattern around its body. "You followed me," she said, but it wasn't quite her voice. It was hollow, as if speaking through a long tube. "What are you doing?" I whispered, knife gripped tightly in my trembling hand. She smiled, teeth gleaming red in the moonlight. "Feeding. It's been so long since I fed properly." She cocked her head. "She's still in here, you know. You're Eliza. Screaming. But there's less of her every hour. Who are you?" My voice broke on the question. The locals called me Old Hollow. Before that, I had older names. It stood, Eliza's movements all wrong, joints bending in impossible ways. Thomas finds me travelers. I find them so much more nourishing than the local wildlife. Their fear tastes sweeter. "Where is he?" "Around." It gestured vaguely with Eliza's bloodied hands. "Everywhere. Nowhere. We are not as separate as you think." Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. "You're the same. You and Thomas." It smiled wider, the expression stretching Eliza's face unnaturally. "Very good. One body for hunting, one for feeding. Tonight I'll wear your skin, and your Eliza will be gone entirely." It stepped toward me and I raised my knife, though I knew I couldn't use it, not while it wore Eliza's body. Rusty's growl turned into a bark, then a full-throated howl that seemed to startle the thing wearing my wife's skin. It hesitated, glancing at the dog with what looked like actual concern. Quiet that beast. I realized with sudden hope that it feared Rusty, or at least was unsettled by him. Animals sense things differently, Thomas had said. Maybe they could sense what humans couldn't. "Rusty," I commanded. "Guard!" Our gentle retriever launched himself at the thing wearing Eliza's body, all teeth and fury. It screamed, a sound no human throat could make, and staggered backward. I used the distraction to look around frantically for anything I could use. My eyes fell on the fire starter in my pocket. I pulled it out along with the small bottle of alcohol-based hand sanitizer we carried for hygiene on the trail. The thing tossed Rusty aside with inhuman strength, sending him crashing into a tree with a yelp of pain. It turned back to me, Eliza's face now contorted into something barely recognizable. "I'm going to wear you inside out," it hissed, advancing again. I waited until it was almost upon me, then squirted the sanitizer directly into its face and struck the fire starter. The alcohol ignited instantly, engulfing its head in blue flames. The scream that followed would haunt me forever, partly because it started as the creature's inhuman wail but transformed halfway through into Eliza's genuine voice, filled with pain and confusion. I tackled her to the ground, rolling her body to extinguish the flames, frantically patting out the fire with my jacket. When it was out, Eliza, my real Eliza, looked up at me with terrified eyes. "Morgan, what's happening? It was in me. It was wearing me like a costume." I helped her up, checking her for serious burns. Her face was reddened, but the fire had gone out quickly enough to prevent severe damage. The mark on her neck, however, was gone, burned away or simply vanished with the creature. "We need to run," I said, calling Rusty to us. He limped over, favoring his right front leg but otherwise intact. "Now. It could come back." "It will," Eliza said with certainty. "It's not gone. It's just regrouping." I could feel it let go when the fire hit, like it was retreating. We ran through the night forest, no direction in mind except away. The fog returned, thicker than ever, but now it seemed to have purpose, tendrils of it reaching for us, cutting off paths, hurting us. Several times we found ourselves back at familiar landmarks despite having run for what felt like miles. "It's toying with us," Eliza gasped as we paused to catch our breath. "The forest itself is part of it." Dawn approached, the fog taking on a grayish tinge. We'd been running for hours, yet the same rock formations, the same distinctive trees kept appearing. We were trapped in some kind of loop, and then we saw it. Thomas's form, walking casually through the trees ahead of us. Except his movements were wrong, boneless, his limbs too long. He turned, and his face was halfway between human and something else, features sliding across his skin like oil on water, settling into different configurations with each step. "The fire was unexpected," it called, voice resonating from everywhere at once. "But ultimately futile. You've been in my hollow since you entered the forest. Did you really think you could run away in my own domain?" Eliza clutched my arm. "The mark," she whispered urgently. "When it was in me, I could see. It comes in through a mark, makes a space inside you, hollows you out until there's room for it to climb in." I looked at Thomas's approaching form, noticing for the first time a circular mark on his neck, identical to the one Eliza had had. "How do we kill it?" I hissed. "I don't think we can. Not here, not in its place." She looked around desperately. "But maybe we can get out of its hollow." "How?" "It loops us back whenever we try to leave, but I could feel how it thinks when it was in me. It's like an algorithm. If we do something it doesn't expect, something outside its patterns." The thing that had been Thomas was getting closer, its form growing less human with each step. "What does it expect us to do?" I asked. "Run." Eliza's eyes widened with realization. "It expects us to run, to try to find a way out? But what if instead we went deeper in?" It sounded insane, but we had no other options. Hand in hand, we turned and ran, not away from the creature, but directly toward the densest, darkest part of the forest, the direction we'd been instinctively avoiding all along. The thing screeched behind us, its footsteps accelerating. Rusty ran ahead, leading the way through the underbrush. The forest grew darker despite the approaching dawn, the trees pressing closer together, branches clawing at our clothes and skin. "It's working," Eliza gasped. "It's confused." The path ahead suddenly opened up, revealing a drop-off, a cliff face overlooking a misty valley far below. We skidded to a stop at the edge, nearly tumbling over. Behind us, the creature crashed through the underbrush, its form now barely resembling anything human, a twisted, elongated silhouette with too many angles. "Nowhere left to run," it rasped, voice like stones grinding together. Eliza looked at me, then at the drop below us, then back at me. I understood immediately. "It won't expect this," she whispered. Hand in hand, with Rusty held tight against my chest, we stepped off the cliff. The sensation of falling lasted both forever and no time at all. Wind rushed past us, the ground hurtled toward us, and then suddenly we were sprawled on damp earth, the early morning sun shining through normal, ordinary trees. Normal birds sang. Normal insects buzzed. We were lying on a well-maintained hiking trail. A wooden sign a few feet away read, "Seneca Creek Trail, 2 miles to Ranger Station." We looked at each other in disbelief, then at Rusty, who was shaking himself off as if nothing unusual had happened. The circular mark on both Thomas's and Eliza's necks was conspicuously absent from my wife's skin. We made it to the ranger station within the hour, telling a sanitized version of our ordeal. We got lost, our gear was stolen, we were pursued by what we thought was a bear. The rangers were sympathetic, giving us coffee and arranging transportation back to civilization. We never returned to the Monongahela National Forest. Never went hiking again, in fact. Some wounds don't heal, and some experiences change you forever. Eliza seems fine most of the time. My Eliza, full of light and compassion, taking her beautiful photographs, loving our dog. But sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, I catch her staring at her reflection with a strange, calculating expression. Sometimes she wakes in the night, moving with that same mechanical precision I saw in the forest. Sometimes Rusty still growls at her for no apparent reason. And sometimes, when she smiles too widely, I could swear I see something hollow behind her eyes, watching me, waiting. I used to think the worst thing about the wilderness was the isolation. Now I know better. It's what follows you home.